Hey guys, welcome back to my channel for another episode of Porn Star Confessions. Today I'm super pumped. I've got the man, the myth, the legend, Legrand Wolf. Welcome.
Hello, hello.
So, I mean, God, with your story, I don't even know where to begin because now, you're like, if I had to assign like Mr. Porn to anyone, it would be you. I mean, you own half of porn, but it wasn't always this way.
True story. That's correct.
So let's start at the beginning because you've got a very, very, very interesting backstory. I don't think even half the people know, like, you were Mormon, correct?
I was once upon a time. That's correct. Yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, I mean, that's true. I grew up Mormon. Yeah.
So, how did you go from being Mormon to where you're at now? Like,
Uh, yeah, I mean, that's more of a, it's hard to kind of put all of that into one short answer. Um, the most concise way to say it might not be this, but here's how I'll try and answer you. Um, when I was a Mormon missionary, there were things that challenged my sense of the truthfulness of that particular organized religion. I didn't leave immediately, but I was in pretty significant leadership positions. Came home from my Mormon mission, went to BYU, and as it is a religious school, a religious institution, but had really good academic experience there because it does focus on academic rigor, which is an awkward thing for a religious school to do. I mean, the Catholics have also faced that, right? You got, uh, history where these Catholic universities are fostering academia, and then people leave the Catholic faith, and then the Catholic Church kind of says, "Oh, God, we got to get rid of these, or can't have a direct association with these, Catholic universities." And I don't know how long it's going to be before the Mormon Church has to like separate itself out from BYU. But when I was there, it was pretty interesting. I could kind of study evolution. I could study things that I think people would assume don't really kind of line up nicely with Mormon teachings. So because I was
London.
really focused
Sorry.
on science, and because I was really focused on philosophy and kind of things that make you think and challenge everything around you, right? Critical thinking was kind
No.
of core to my educational experience. I found myself continuing that journey that started on my Mormon mission, where I was really challenging things, right? And at the time, one of the things that was just a hot button issue for everyone was gay marriage. Um, and there were debates, and people were talking about it all the time. And, you know, yeah, anyway, whatever. So it was kind of a discussion all the time. And I wasn't ready to come out, didn't, but I was dating girls and kind of knew in the back of my mind, I had plenty of, I didn't call it gay, mostly because I didn't want to be gay, but I absolutely knew I was gay, and I was doing all kinds of gay things ever since I was a kid. But then I went to medical school, and I stayed in Utah. I got into different medical schools, but I went to the University of Utah Medical School, assuming that if I stayed in Utah, maybe I'd be able to marry a girl. Um, and while I was at the University of Utah Medical School, while I was dating a girl, a Mormon girl, um, I sort of had the coming out process, sort of like I guess all of the different kind of pieces for coming out fell in place, and I did. I chose to come out, um,
So,
and when I did come out, that I think was the event that opened up the way for me to be in porn. That was the kind of trigger because critically, it was the first time I was assessing what the problem was. Am I the problem? Is there a problem with my kind of religion? Is there a problem with society? Why is it that we have these hangups around homosexuality? Why is it that we have hangups with people? And the conclusion that I drew then was sort of the early stages of me saying, there's only one thing that makes me different than everyone else. It's the sex that I have, or the sex that I want to have.
mhm.
And had much real sex at that point. Lots of kind of playing around, but um, and because I understood that, because I understood that that was the only thing that made me different, it set me on a path to normalizing gay sex. Right. So if the only thing that makes gay people different than straight people is the sex that you have because of the attraction that you have, and it's innate to who you are, and you can't change it, just like any other taste that you might have, and pretty fundamental to how you want to live your life and who you love and what happiness. I mean, all kinds of things are tied into this. Um, I I began the process of not just like coming out and saying this is who I am because this is the sex that I want to have, but also really trying to say, guys, world, hello, the reason they dislike us is because of our sex. It does not, like, there is nothing, any pride parade you have that doesn't actually put front and center the sex that you are having. That's the only thing that makes us different. Anything that you are doing at all that does not, like, ignores this fact, there will never be a time, if this is not corrected, when a religion or a church or a society or anyone is going to say, oh yeah, you're fine. Because the moment they start thinking about the sex that you have, it really has to go to the root of hatred. Why do people hate gay people? And if there is any bias at all, what is that bias rooted in? And if there's only one thing that makes it different, that makes us different, then it must be rooted in that one thing. The sex that you have is the thing that all bias and all hatred is rooted in. And it's a little bit more complicated, weirdly, because we don't think about it this way. But if it was your skin color, you're wearing it out on your, like, it's right out there. Oh, the reason why people are biased, the reason they hate you is because your skin color. So you must make it so that people stop, hating, kind of fixating or kind of having a bias around skin color. But for us, because it's a sort of a hidden, when we are a hidden population, you can blend in, right? It's this thing inside of you. We somehow miss the point. The point is the bias and the hatred is around the sex. And therefore you must address that one thing if you want to get past the bias and the hatred. That's it. And again, this is kind of became a very complicated process that then I started unpacking and thinking about, what does this actually mean? What will this mean for my life?
Wow. Okay. All right. I've got a ton of questions there.
Sure.
But my first and foremost question is, like, even in other interviews that I've watched with you and things that I've read, is the way your mind works is, I don't want to say you're like Vulcan, but like people in today's society are so like emotionally charged. It's like a bouncy ball just bouncing all over the room. Whereas you, like, you are so methodical and thorough, and you critically think about everything, and you evaluate, and you're like, okay, I'm doing this, but why am I doing this? And that seems to be like the underlying theme in virtually everything you do. My question is, where does that come from? Like, were you always like that, even as a kid?
No, I mean, when I was a kid, uh, I was, I think, like a lot of, I don't know, I guess maybe this is an assumption. My assumption is that a lot of us were different, who were different when we were younger, were picked on or bullied, right? I don't know. It's probably less true today than it was before, but I was different. And I was different for a lot of reasons. I was different because I was gay. So, like, from a very young age, definitely was not interested in, kissing a girl. I wanted to kiss a boy. I was definitely not interested in, things that my guy friends, as they were kind of going through puberty, et cetera, that they were interested in. I was very much interested in those guy friends. And so that made me different. I also was much more sciencey, sort of like run around in the mud outside, find snakes, swim in rivers, I just, and I liked the nerdy science part of everything that was around me. So I'd talk in ways that I think made people feel like I was weird. I probably was. So already, like, I wasn't the kind of kid that, I think I was sort of like at the wrong moment in time. I think, if I've been born 100 years earlier, that's what kids did. But when I was a kid, I didn't get a Nintendo. So I, was outside a lot. My friends are all playing Nintendo, and I go over to their house to play Nintendo. Um, and when I would want to do fun things outside, I could kind of coax them because you're young men. Boys like to go
Yeah.
outside and play outside. That's fine. But then when I start talking about like nerdy things, like the composition of soil or certain types of plants and what they're called and what you can do with them, like people are like, "Yeah, you're fucking weird." But on top of that, I also and also I was like very sensitive about animals. So anytime anyone would harm an animal of any kind, you'd see a very emotional response from me. Big, huge emotions. And young kids are cruel and awful. So it's this weird, kid already. I'm sexually charged in ways that they're not. I'm always trying to get my male friends naked. We're always skinny dipping and doing things, and like constantly, like people would go for the Playboy magazine. I'd be like, oh, look at this thing, and it was the guy instead of the girl centerfold, right? Whatever. Anyway, so I like already sort of different. People sense that, even if they don't know exactly why, they sense it, and then on top of that, I'm not sort of like the kid that's got the Nintendo in his house. I'm always playing outside and doing weird things and talking about weird things. And then, but then on top of all that, my parents, they had 7 kids. They didn't really prepare me in a way to be a normal Mormon, because I wasn't in Utah. I wasn't sort of surrounded by Mormons all the time. So I was like a Mormon who went to church and then went to school where no one else was really Mormon. And I was told at church, that you have to act and think and behave in a certain way. And I took it quite literally. Whereas my cousins who grew up in Utah, they would rebel by like smoking cigarettes and doing it because everyone was Mormon, right?
Yeah.
That was not my situation. My situation was living, where I had to be like a representative of Mormonism. So, someone does something, I'm like, I had a very uncool response to things. So I like on top of everything else that wasn't working for me, you add to the mix that I was also the kid that would talk about the Holy Ghost. I'm the kid that would talk about like weird shit, and not only talk about it, but also wouldn't go along with anything that I perceived to be immoral or problematic. And that also is not an awesome place to be as a kid who's trying to like fit in, and
Yeah.
so a lot of factors working against me. And one time I sat down with my dad and I was like, this isn't really working, like socially. I'm like really having a hard time. I'm really struggling. And I was getting like beaten up, and I was a big kid. And he said, what's going to happen is that in time, all this is going to be behind you. And the kids that are acting, that are bullies now, they're trying to figure things out. The best thing, because I was like, should I, like he initially his instinct, my dad's like, he was a wrestler, straight dude. We were very good friends, but he's like, you got to punch the kid, back in the face if he comes after you. Like if someone's like starting to push you down, you're going to punch him. And I was like, Dad, like if I punch, someone in the face, first of all, I mean, like, I don't know that I can do that. If I do, and I really harm them, this is making me incredibly uncomfortable. Like I have a visceral negative response to violence, and I don't want violence to happen to me. I don't want violence. I don't want to, perpetrate violence on anyone else. But I think that it would go very, very badly. If I punch someone in the nose, he's like, "I punch him in the nose," and I'm like, "But what if I like break their nose? What if their nose goes into their brain? What if I kill them? Like I don't like. What if I like? You're telling me something that I can't quite. I don't have boundaries. I've never gotten in a fight. I don't know how to do this." And he's like, instead of doing that, so sorry. I wish it's on do not disturb and it's on silent, and yet it's ringing. Anyway, so I said I know that doesn't work for me, and I got kind of emotional. And then he came up to my room a little bit later, and he said, "Tell you what, these kids, they're coming after you, but later in life, you're going to be stronger and you're going to be smarter, and none of this is really going to matter. The right thing to do, you're absolutely right, is to sort of draw a lesson from nature. At this point, you need to survive." And I'm not saying that you should be a coward, but when there is the possibility of physical violence, if you don't know how to react to it, get out of there. Get out of there and get yourself some distance between you and that person. Go find someone and, kind of process what's going on. And if they're just being mean for mean's sake, that'll go away eventually. And if we need to kind of, figure out something else, but always get yourself out of that situation. I'm not a fast kid, but I could see problems when they were coming. So I tried really hard to steer clear of problems, but it gave me, at least during my young life, a sense that I needed to get the fuck out of a situation very quickly, when things would come up. And when I was 16, I left home instead of doing a senior year in high school. I went to Ukraine. It was something my dad encouraged. He helped me set up a program where I was studying art and music and language in Kiev. And so everyone else who's my age was going to a senior year in high school, and I had fucked off and gone to Ukraine and had my own apartment. And this was before, more of a missionary thing. And at that time, I started to develop my own sense of kind of like self. And I realized I am actually quite strong, but it did create other problems, right? So this kind of get away, you still have to also learn when to turn around and fight and how to fight. And I didn't learn that as a kid, and I didn't learn exactly what it meant. So I still had these struggles, that until I was about 35, um, affected me, where I don't quite know when I'm supposed to, like, run away from something or when I'm supposed to face it. And so it really helped, and it really helped kind of form who I am. But then later in life, just like learning about dating, learning about my sexuality, later in life, I also learned how to turn around and fight and when to fight. So generally speaking, I I am more analytical now because of the way in which I grew up, and I think that the way in which I grew up forced me to look at the world differently than everyone else. And it also forced me to kind of take a really strong look at those mechanisms that helped me, thrive when I was younger, helped me actually survive, um, and that maybe weren't working later in life. And then at a certain point, yes, I start to get really methodical and really kind of think about, like, what is working, what's not working. So I don't know, it's Vulcan, but it's it's definitely different than I think what would have happened if I had grown up like my older brother, straight and not needing to challenge anything. Um,
Gotcha.
yeah, I am different, and I am grateful that I'm different, because I think my life overall is better. You know, my
Right.
my midlife crisis, I don't think I was feeling that way when I had to learn, what it looks like to actually fight. That really sucked, and I think some really important lessons were learned. But you have to learn sometime, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. So when did you start questioning your religion? Do you remember a specific moment in time where you're like, this
So
maybe not be
if I'm being honest, when I was a kid, I asked my dad where God came from, but by kid I mean like 5, right? Same time Santa Claus questions came up.
okay.
I walk into my dad's bathroom. He's in there shaving, and it's sort of my habit on Sunday mornings when he's getting ready. I go in and I have my little kind of dad conversations. So I walked in there, and I'm like, I don't think Santa Claus is real. My dad's like, can't fool you. Anyway, so then another time I go in there, and I'm like, Dad, if God made everyone, who made God? And my dad's like, good question. Maybe other gods. And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, it's good to question things. Kind of, move right along. And when I was 8, before I got baptized, my dad, as a Mormon, and my dad's like, do you have any questions? You have to really, I don't remember this. A lot of stuff was being thrown at me. But I have pretty vivid recollection. He's getting in his white suit, and I'm kind of standing there, and I'm putting on this little white jumper. Um, and he's just asked me, do you have any questions? Do you really, you kind of all in, like, this is your opportunity. All your sins are washed away. Um, a really little kid, and I'm thinking, I, I don't believe that this God, like this whole weird cycle thing, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, who created God? Where does God come from? And he's like, that's actually part of faith. It was the first time this had really been thrown at me. It's like, faith means that you don't totally understand it. You just have to, believe in it. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. I understand faith then. Faith just means I don't I don't get it. It doesn't make sense, and I'm just supposed to believe it anyway. Um, but then later, I would come back to things. So when I was a Mormon missionary, I was put in a really awkward situation where someone who was in my congregation, because I was an ecclesiastical leader, so I wasn't just a Mormon missionary, I was also a Mormon missionary who had the responsibility of being kind of like a pastor for a congregation. There's called a branch president, but within my congregation, I was training someone who was going to take my place when I left, who's going to be that ecclesiastical leader in that area. So of course, I was, a 20-year-old who was going to go home back to the U.S. And the guy came to me at a certain point, told me that he had XXY in private, in confidence. He had XXY syndrome, meaning both male and female chromosomes. And in Russian, this was kind of a difficult conversation, as you can imagine. When he gets to the point where he tells me he has a blind vaginal canal, these words are kind of really literal in Russian. Like, I have a vaginal canal that cannot see. I have no idea what this means. 20, and I had been an EMT before my mission, and even had done an EMTI intermediate. It's kind of like on its way to a paramedic. So I had quite a bit of medical information in my head. And I, when it finally dawned on me what this guy was saying, incredibly handsome guy. I probably picked him to be my, predecessor mostly because I just thought he was crazy handsome. Super well built, muscular, also crazy charming. And a lot of Russians just aren't. Ukrainians are, but Russians just are not charming people, generally speaking. But he was crazy charming and super muscular, very handsome. And he says he has this blind vaginal canal. And at a certain point, he kind of like, hey, you, so you understand, I don't have a dick. But anyway, however it was, he worded this, right? And I was like, and he's like, do I have to dress like a woman if, I don't have the parts? And I was like, whoa. And he's like, do I have to dress like a woman if I want to marry a man? And I was like, okay. He's like, do I, and I think this is going to be a problem. At some point, someone's going to realize this. And I think this is going to challenge other people's faith. I don't think that and I, was going on to kind of give him the Melchizedek priesthood, which is higher priesthood. So anyway, I contacted my ecclesiastical leader, who's known as a mission president. And I sort of have a vague conversation with him because I don't know what this is going to do. I don't want this guy's, membership in the church to be jeopardized. And I feel like he's given me something that's really confidential. Anyway, I end up having really private conversations, and realize that the Mormon church, its position is that, if he has the female parts, he needs to, he needs to look the look. And no, it's not okay for him to, if he has XXY and he has a blind vaginal canal, it doesn't matter from their standpoint. Anyway, there's really, really screwed up stuff starts getting thrown in my direction. And I got really worked up. Fairness in my brain is so important. And I just thought this is incredibly unfair. And that was a real big turning point. And there were several other things that happened on my Mormon mission that I just thought weren't right. So I think that was the real cracking. But even if that hadn't happened, I was gay. So by the time I came home off my Mormon mission, the things that really were challenging is the fact that I wanted to date guys just like my guy friends wanted to date girls. And I would challenge people when I was at BYU to think about things from another person's perspective. So people would say gay people, and I'm like, really? So you're telling me if the world were in back the other way around, and you lived in a world where men married men, and the Mormon church told you you had to marry men, but you were attracted to women, you would marry a dude and suck it up. You just pretend that you're gay because that's what the church is telling you to do. You're saying you didn't choose to be, straight, your star. You're telling me that you would just be totally okay with, making out with a guy and having sex with a guy just because the Mormon church tells you this? And they were like, oh man, no, that's, I what? And I was like, yeah, but now put yourself in their shoes. And that's what you're asking them to do. And it really tripped people up. And I got lots of people sort of saying, man, I never really thought about it from that, point of view. I never thought about someone else's perspective. I'm like, Jesus Christ, we talk about this all the time. Think, put yourself in someone else's shoes, right? Come on. And it's not that hard. And yeah, and over again. I mean, I remember when the Brokeback Mountain situation happened, I was a medical student at the University of Utah, and this guy who had said no to Brokeback Mountain in all the theaters that he owned, which were the majority of the theaters in Salt Lake City. But yes, it's okay if hostile, where they're like buying and selling girls and ripping them apart, for some guy's pleasure. And I was like, they're both fiction, but you're okay with, and so it's totally like they should have a play. You're allowed to, have any fiction you want, but you're going to tell me that it's okay to have the fiction of Hostel in your theaters, but it's not okay to have the fiction of pretty tame Romeo and Juliet, just two dudes story going on with Brokeback Mountain. Really? So, and then the guy came and, because everyone was upset, University of Utah campus. He's like, why would people be upset? I'm like, imagine when you were a young Mormon that your feelings for girls, remember that when you wanted to like hold a girl's hand, and imagine that the roles were reversed. And I went through that whole same scenario with him, and he's like, oh my gosh, it's like, imagine a young man who's like trying to deal with this, and he's being told, no, that thing that you feel, imagine it were you, and you were told like that thing you feel towards girls cannot happen. It's a sin. And you even think that it's a sin. On top of that, you go on a date with a girl. Now you feel incredibly guilty, and you got to hide that and bury it. And ultimately, you think, oh, I want to marry a girl, and everyone's like, what are you talking about? Don't even say that. You need to marry a guy. That's what you're supposed to do. He's like, well, I never really thought about it that way. And I'm like, yeah, it's just shocking, isn't it? Anyway, and it was amazing. And everyone in the room was weird. They were like, University of Utah professors, there were students, and all of them were dead silent as I was talking. And I sensed in that moment that I had a voice and that people were really listening, because everyone was like completely silent. They all kind of looked at, people came up to me afterwards. He even did. The guy's name's Miller, Larry H. Miller. His name was on the side of the stadium, the Utah Jazz Stadium. Anyway, so he came up to me afterwards. He's like, young man, I really appreciate it. So I'm a medical student. I really appreciate it. You provided a perspective, and you're gay. And I was like, yeah, I'm gay, definitely gay. Last I checked, came out. He's like, yeah, just don't really talk to me that way. Just, I don't know. And you grew up Mormon? I'm like, yeah. It's like, yeah, I really appreciate it. You really changed my perspective on this. I really feel like I need to think about this differently. I was like, I'm glad. And here's my number. And, if you need anything, talk to someone about, what's going on. I guarantee you that among your like 100, grandchildren that you probably have, you have some gay grandkids. And, when the time comes and you're going to, they're going to come out, be generous, be nice, be kind, because that's what everyone needs. Hopefully you can start seeing things from the perspective of a young person. That's what I hope you do. And if you want some help with that, reach out.
Damn. Okay, I just want to reiterate what I told you before we started, which is I am beyond impressed with you. Like, quick sidebar, you would make a phenomenal ethics professor and you would make a phenomenal attorney.
I don't know about
I
either of
mean,
those things, but I appreciate the compliment. Thank you.
wow, okay. So, going back to what you said about the hatred of gays, where do you think that comes from? Because a lot of people, like, where they go out and they gay bash, or they'll do the, what's that called, when like a group of straight guys will like, you know seduce a gay guy online just to gay bash him, like that type of shit. I would bet you 99% of the time those guys are severely closeted and they're just hating that which was, is within themselves. But other than those, where do you think it comes from?
I mean, yeah, I think that the interest to separate yourself from other gay people and to really establish I'm not gay by being pretty horrible to other gay people, yeah, it's a pretty well documented phenomenon. It's pretty horrible, um, but that wouldn't exist if there weren't a broader societal pressure suggesting,
Mhm.
or kind of like sentiment suggesting, that
Yeah.
homosexuality is fundamentally problematic, right? Gay people aren't
Mhm.
going to hate themselves so much that they perpetrate something awful on other gay people in large enough numbers that it creates this sort of sense that, oh, that's that's something I've heard about, this phenomenon I've heard about, unless there were, in our kind of broader societal context, this problem where we see gay people as disgusting or less something really problematic. Um, and I think it, I'm not an expert, but I think it is actually fairly simple. But I guess take it with a grain of salt. But I think my my perspective on this is that is similar, probably to individuals like Sam Harris or Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, that it takes religion for people to do really horrible things, right? You don't get people committing just atrocious uh, acts of not just unkindness but brutality on each other without this really uh, incredible ingredient called religion. Religion gives people permission to do things, and religion takes a variety, like several different forms. There's sort of the religion that we all know, which is organized religion, but uh, religion can also be sort of like a state-sponsored kind of way of viewing things. So,
Hmm.
whether or not you're talking about Catholicism and Mormonism and Judaism and Islam, or you're talking about Nazism, Nazis,
Yeah.
they're different sides of the exact same coin, in my opinion. They're the same in a couple of key ways. They get people as a group to act and behave in a way that they would not probably act or behave individually, right? It's going to be
Uh,
pretty hard to get a family member to harm another family member at scale, but you can get family members to harm family members at scale with mechanisms that kind of control a group. And mechanisms that control a group effectively are a kind of a core belief that everyone kind of subscribes to, right? And if you have a couple of core beliefs that everyone subscribes to, and then you have a power structure that puts those pressures in place so that people want to maintain that belief, they kind of come together. The pressure is there to kind of keep that kind of cohesiveness in a group. Yeah, then you can see some really crazy and bad things happen.
yeah.
And my sense is, also going to take this grain of salt, but my sense is that we have seen throughout human history over and over and over again um, the kind of use of religious power and authority to enacting horrible uh, enact atrocities against other, like
Yeah.
humans against humans, right? And I mean, obviously there are lots of reasons why people have hurt each other, but none have been as significant, in my opinion, as religion. Religion is probably the single greatest cause of death and sorrow and tragedy in our world, where humans are perpetrating. And frankly, I mean, if I can make a further assertion, I think that religion will ultimately be the cause of uh, the demise of humanity if we are not smart enough as humans to pull ourselves back. Because religion isn't particularly concerned about the survival of the species. It's really, again, it's wild thing. It's it acts against our interests as a species. It only acts to preserve its own power and its own belief structure, and oftentimes that can act in opposition to what is going to help us survive as a species, right? So it's more important that people uphold the belief that exists within a religion than it is that they preserve the environment within which they are living. And because the belief is more important than your well-being or the well-being of your children, um, and belief must be preserved, people will act in ways that will fundamentally eradicate the variables that allow us to live on this planet. So like at a smaller scale, homosexuality. Homosexuality is uh, it is not necessary. I think when it comes to religion, it's not necessary that be something that people perceive as a threat, but it was chosen. I mean, and most things in religion are arbitrary. It was arbitrarily chosen, in my opinion. It was arbitrarily chosen because it sits outside of a normal power structure. So the normal power structure that like people can formulate in their head, man, power over woman. That's a normal power structure that exists, and man has power over his offspring. When you have two men or you have two women, suddenly you've got something that exists outside of this normal power structure, and therefore that aberration is that's a bad thing. And bad things that exist outside of that structure go from being bad to being evil, and evil things become, something you need to violently oppose and put away. And that pretty quickly escalates to harm that comes to individuals who fit outside of that, sort of norm, that power structure. And again, that power structure has to be maintained at all costs in order for religion to continue to exert its power and control. That's not probably a particularly sophisticated way to look at this. I'm sure there are people who are smarter than me and can talk about this, but I kind of try and dumb things down for myself so I can kind of can communicate about it with others and understand the world around me. And that's how I perceive this particular challenge, is that it largely is a societal problem that's come into existence not for any other reason other than religious intolerance of an aberration, something that doesn't fit within kind of a religious structure of power.
Damn. Okay, that answer is going to be rattling around in my brain for the next week. You, wow, you definitely could have a job as a professional mind changer, because there's several like analogies, like the my best friend, he was in a cult for a long time, and he had to leave because of being gay. And yeah, I'm gonna definitely tell him what you said about the Mormon Church and the being gay and flipping it. Wow. Okay. No. And so would I be correct in assuming you're not religious anymore?
Yeah, I'm pretty not religious.
Okay.
I don't subscribe to religion. Um, it would probably uh, there are a couple of things in life that if I could actually accomplish, uh, I would just feel absolutely great about on a small scale, but I think something that'd be incredibly impactful. Um, just here in the U.S., it'd be it just it would be a game changer in the short term if we could remove the tax exemption that exists for churches. If you remove the tax exemption, then there's less of a monetary incentive for a lot of churches to exist and continue to perpetuate the various problematic uh, influences that they exert in a variety of different ways. And so you if you got rid of the tax exemptions for churches, many people would go and find other professions instead of trying to be professional religious people, persuading people to give them their money and telling them stories about a different version of Santa Claus. And once that
Well,
shift happens, once you have that shift, you put a ton of money back into our kind of civic system. You put a ton of money back into government that then can be pumped towards education. It can be pumped towards uh, projects that I think will be to the betterment of our entire society, high-speed rail and transportation systems, et cetera. So you start thinking, okay, so you're going to have less religious influence. People can choose to, believe whatever they want to believe, but we're not going to subsidize it, which I think is important. Right now, we subsidize. The Mormon Church is one of the biggest landowners in the United States. The Mormon Church has more money than anyone else. The Mormon Church is not taxed. Mormon Church can get involved in politics, and because it has so much money, it actually doesn't suffer the consequences of a lot of its actions. Um, and that Mormon Church, while it's incredibly wealthy, it's not as wealthy as the Catholic Church, but it's pretty darn close. I mean, and religions have a ton of money, and they take in a ton of money, pay no taxes, and they exert a ton of influence. So you make that one change, again, it's not end all and be all, but that would be, if I could somehow affect that change in my life, I think that I'd do some good in people's lives, because I think we'd be able to help with programs that and fund programs that will help poor people, elevate them out of poverty, help more children have access to not just food and shelter, but education, really good education, make education not just affordable but free, work towards healthcare that is more accessible and available to everyone. I mean, these ideas aren't necessarily democratic ideas. They're ideas that I consider to just be good ideas so that people can live good lives on this planet. I don't care what your politics are. I just want people to be happy and healthy. And I think we all will be better off when everyone is happy and healthy. So, that really is sort of my focus. Again, if this small change over here can affect lots and lots of other changes elsewhere, I'm all for it. And yeah, I mean, I won't, I'm not going to lose any sleep or cry at all. Churches lose some tax exempt, status. It's fantastic. That is going, and by the way, they've only had tax exempt status for a couple of decades. I mean, that's not like a given, and it certainly doesn't exist in other countries. Other countries that
Oh,
um, don't go that route, don't suffer some of the consequences that we're suffering in the United States by allowing this sort of bizarre thing to take place right in front of our eyes.
wow. Okay. I mean, I personally consider myself a Christian, and I've been 100% open to everything you've said. And I would actually agree with what you just said 1,000%, like 10,000%. So,
Take for if you're a Christian, then in theory, right, the Christian point of view. I think if you were an alien looking at our planet from the outside, right, and you came to, like, as an alien looking at the United States, and then and someone presented to you, Christian dogma, and the Christian dogma, is largely that you want poor people to be fed and taken care of, that you want there to be peace, that love is supreme, most important thing. Families, you really want to support families. Um, those principles that we consider to be Christian in the United States, that's sort of kind of this weird kind of uh, synonymous kind of language. I'm going to, take the word Christian and I'm going to now superimpose it on these principles of, making sure that the poor are taken care of, making sure that, people don't go hungry, that they're clothed, that they're, by and large treated fairly and with kindness. Kindness is super important. I think you'd have a really hard time as an alien, alien looking down, from space and saying, yeah, the politics of those people call themselves Christian totally makes sense. It would be really hard. You'd say, like, I don't quite get it. In a roundabout way, like I feel like you're kind of going after very specific issues, but holistically, this isn't, like, that doesn't make sense. Like, holistically, it feels like everyone's missing the mark here. Like, if you believe in, generally, this idea that you want to treat your neighbor in a particular way, and you want to, make sure that love and kindness and generosity are kind of first and foremost, that you don't judge other people, that there isn't judgment,
thank
that
God.
instead you really, prioritize living your life,
Yep,
and kind of thinking about how you want to live your life, wanting to make sure that you're allowed to live your life, but also affording everyone else the opportunity to live their life that way. You don't,
yep,
you would, you would align yourself largely with Satan's plan of controlling everyone if you demanded that people think and believe the way you do. You would find
yep.
yourself sort of in a weird position of calling yourself a Christian if your position was then, oh, I actually am going to take away people's freedom or their agency to
Yeah,
choose, religion.
yeah,
In fact, the whole point in theory of a Christian, belief system is to allow the world to exist, but you choose
yep.
to live in a certain way. But instead, what's happening is they're saying, no, we actually want to control the world and tell people how to live their lives. And so again, it's at odds, that the way in which politics and Christianity, kind of using the big C word,
Yeah,
um, they're at odds with each other, in my opinion, the current state of things. Because
Yeah.
again, I don't think as an alien looking at the world, you would really say, "Oh yeah, yeah, the broader Christian world is doing exactly what I could expect when looking at the the canon that they have, when looking at their sort of the ideas that they purport to have."
Yeah.
Um, and this is a different story. Like I'd say something different when we're talking about Islam. I'd say something different when we're talking about Judaism. But like when it comes to Christianity, I also grew up in a religion that believed in Jesus Christ and believed in, as a savior, heaven and hell, variations of heaven, because Mormons believe in like a stepped heaven. But regardless, sort of, it's also, and we believed in the Bible, Mormons do. So like, I'm pretty familiar and can speak, I think constructively to people who have a Christian faith. That look, I think we should reevaluate
Yeah.
what we're saying and doing, as like all of us, not just Christians. We should reevaluate, because if you come from a Christian background, I really think we should maybe take a different tack. And I think I'm happy to work with you, as someone who comes from a Christian background, because generally speaking, your dogma aligns with my values and what I
Yeah.
what I believe. And if they don't, I kind of like to know why, and let's talk it out. Let's figure it out,
Yeah.
and let's come to some type of consensus, because we share the planet, and I don't see any reason for us to share it in ways that are horrible.
No.
We should
No.
find a way to live together.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said 100%. Like, I can't stand the Christians who make all Christians look bad. And unfortunately, that seems, in my experience, to be the majority. And I actually have a quote tattooed on my body that I think you'll like. The quote is, I put no stock in religion. By the word religion, I have seen the lunacy of fanatics of every denomination be called the will of God. Holiness is in right action, courage on behalf of those who cannot defend themselves, and what you decide to do every day will either make you a good man or not.
Yep, that's some wisdom there.
So, um, one other question I did have, you're still close with your father, correct?
Mhm. Very.
And would I be correct in assuming, because it sounds like you had a really positive childhood, would I be correct in assuming that your dad was always kind of your hero? Just even the way you talk about like those conversations you had when you were younger, it it really seems like the two of you are incredibly close.
My dad made it really easy for me to be close to him, but also, uh, I don't know whether that was intentional or not, but he doesn't really. Um, there's no kind of hero worship in his brain. He has ego, plenty of ego, but his ego is not around needing his kids to, uh, tell him that a certain thing, or kind of be in a certain relationship with him. Um, so my friendship with him was always just really easy. He just and I think he made it super easy because he's just there, and he cared, and he was lovely as a human being. He exemplified someone who approached the world trying to offer kindness and kind of generosity to others first and foremost. I mean, not that he doesn't have his problems, but that was he led with um, kindness and fairness, and um, so I guess to your question, is it right that we were always friends? I think my relationship with my father never really had too many problems, but I was always very conscious of what he would say. I mean, Sunday dinner was the time when we gather all as a family, but oftentimes during the week we also ate dinner all together. Most days. Um, Actually, now that I think about it, most days we had dinner when he was in town. He worked in um, uh, educational development projects, so he was often traveling, helping shape academic programs in developing countries. Um, but he was home probably 75% of the year, if not more. And when he was home, most of the time we would have dinner all together, and he, would talk, and I'd listen to his ideas, and everyone else would talk. I mean, it was, but whatever. I understood usually where he was coming from, um, and didn't find myself at odds. But I definitely sensed when things were said about things relating to sexuality, which was rare, uh, that I paid attention. When I was coming out, and he was, I was in medical school, and I said, I want to go on a drive with you. I need to tell you something really important. When I came out to him, and I parked on the side of the road going up um, one of the canyons in Utah, and I told him I'm gay, and kind of walked him through it. One of the very first things he said was, I hope I've never said anything that hurt you. Um, and he
Wow.
also said, we're wrong. Clearly, the Mormon Church is wrong about homosexuality. That's the only way I can kind of interpret this. And has never really gone back. I mean, he's done a couple of interesting dances around the other kids as they were trying to figure things out. All my older siblings, but not with me. Never, and he, just mostly was gentle with them, as they were kind of figuring things out, and asked me to be gentle too. But in that moment, and from that moment forward, uh, pretty unwavering that, oh, yep, the Mormon Church has got this
Wow.
wrong. If I've done anything to ever, hurt you or offend you, I'm super sorry. And then a bunch of other hilarious things came out of his mouth, like, are you sure? And have you ever had sex with a woman? Do you know? And I was like, have you ever had sex with a dude? Do you know? Anyway, so I mean, there was a bunch of really, like, funny things that I can tell you about that. 2 hours sitting on the side of the road in Canyonland with my dad, who I love and respect him a great deal, but um, I wouldn't want you to think that, and I wouldn't want to give the impression um, that my dad and I never had any sort of problems. But fundamentally, who my dad was not someone who was mean. He's not someone who demanded that I kind of approach him in a certain way. He wasn't trying to make a clone of himself. Um, the only pressure I ever really felt from him was when I got into medical school, and I was really second guessing going to medical school. And in that moment, I think it's the only time he's really pushed me. He's like, okay, you go to medical school because, and kind of walked me through it. And I was like, yeah, but I think I gravitate more towards business. And he's like, how do you, what? Where's that even coming from? As a kid, you wanted to be like a zoologist and a marine biologist, and now, whatever, animals. And now, as a young man, you were, a paramedic, and, or EMT, then EMTI, and a paramedic, whatever. And now you're getting into medical school. You've gotten in, you should do this, And by the way, a doctor is a kind of businessman. Anyway, so he was really pushing me. But otherwise, no. I mean, he was very much, he was supportive of the things that I wanted to do in ways that I think most parents can be. Most parents probably are. I think we tend to hear about the exceptions more. So you'll hear about the mean dad. You'll hear about sort of the really difficult, situations with parents, because those are worth talking about, and people want to highlight those. But you don't really hear about the gentle father figures, um, who, you know, they play their role as father and mentor, and they do it gently and kindly, because those don't rise to the level of people wanting to have, a really interesting story. So I'm grateful that my dad and I are kind of have a boring, we were boring in a sense, and it's lovely. I mean, I don't mean to. I just mean to say it's not like because I had this glorious experience with my father. No, it was great. We went fishing together. We hung out. Love my dad, and I'm a better human because he was my dad. But I also recognize that he wasn't perfect, and he didn't know what he was doing when he had kids. He's just a dude trying to, follow the instructions at the end. Made mistakes, and that's fine. And along the way, because he happens to be a good guy, things turned out okay.
Wow. Damn. I, wow. That I think most people would love to have that type of relationship with either one of their parents. Um, when it came to medical school, though, when did that finally reach its breaking point, if you will? Like as far
So
as you taking the path you did.
yeah, you mean playing a doctor in porn instead of and creating a company where I've made a porn doctor rather famous. Um, yeah, I'm more of a CEO than I am a doctor by a long shot. In fact, I'm more of a CEO than I'm a porn performer. I was just telling someone recently the number of hours that I spend, doing work as a CEO is like 99 to every 1 hour that I spend on camera. But um, you know, it, medical school for me was a really great experience because it helped me understand, I think, what is happening in academia in general. I think a lot of people they go down the road because they think this is what is expected of me. This is kind of a good
Mhm.
thing, and I definitely had that like be a doctor, be a lawyer, and I already gravitated towards the biological sciences. So this really made sense to me. Be a doctor.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe at some point in my hormonal 15, 16 teenage years I thought, oh, this is a way for me to like see guys naked. Ah. But in the same way that I think like other teenagers are thinking about being a doctor and like I'm going to be a gynecologist and have no idea what that actually like is really going to mean. Shock, spoiler alert, not the sexy thing you think it's going to mean if you're 15 and 16. But I think by the time I was 20 something, 22, 23, and thinking about medical school at that point, I was thinking, oh, no, no. If I'm going to come out, I better own my own home. I better, better have a really good profession. I better be really like solidly like I'm a person who you have to respect. Oh, and by the way, there's like shameful thing over here. Ignore that. Or yeah. Don't pay attention. I happen to be gay. They're gonna just have to ignore it because I'm, this impressive person. Um, and yeah, when you actually come out and you realize, no, I don't actually give a shit, but I'm not going to care. Like I actually am going to do what I want to do. And it takes a second. Like you have to get there to have that sort of self assurance. But when I was in medical school, I had professors. It's. Let me back up. Medical school is like advanced undergrad in a way, but it's also like taking a step back. So my undergrad experience was this incredibly cool experience where I get to question everything and I get to learn 24/7. I'm just like shove food in my face and I learn. I run around, at the gym and I learn. I get to read a book. I can do whatever. My biggest complaints in life were that like I have to spend a ton of time reading. And holy fuck, wouldn't it be great to go back to being, an undergrad again? You just don't even realize what an amazing thing it was. But the moment you leave undergrad, oh, I realized it fast because then when I was in medical school, um, you realize that okay, I'm actually now zeroing in on subjects that maybe aren't super interesting to me, and I don't have a choice. Undergrad, you get to choose your classes, and choose your electives, whatever. No, I'm on a track that is prescribed for me, and if I don't like these things, and some of these things I'm not like super into, and I've already done gross anatomy 3 times. Why am I having to stay up until 3 or 4 a.m. to memorize, a particular bifurcation of a particular nerve in a particular part of the body at a particular whatever? And and it's wild. I was like, I watch people who, developed sleep disorders because they're trying so hard to kind of cram all this information in their head. And I was like, no, no, like, and this is before ChatGPT. It's before like there, because that's only a year old, but like it was at a time where already I felt like I can use information technology, I can use computers to augment what I know to be a much better physician. I don't need 17th century medicine training. I need training on how to use current tools, and frankly I'm not really willing to be miserable for the next what felt like it was going to be 8 years of misery, because I've learned a lot of the things that I already need to know. Now I want to learn how to actually interact
Oh,
with patients and learn how to heal, and instead I'm learning the ins and outs of um, pharmacology in a way that is not hugely applicable it's kind of too in depth. I'm not going to be a pharmacologist, but I'm also not learning like applied pharmacology. I'm not learning how to actually help someone be healthier. I'm learning about molecular structures, and I'm not going to be a molecular scientist. I'm learning OChem in a way like I can't imagine that doctors are doing it. It's kind of like this abstract learning still, but abstract learning around subjects I'm not hugely invested in, and that frankly I didn't think were going to make for better doctors. They might make for a better researcher if you're going down the road of like research scientist, or if you're really gifted in like anyway, whatever. So the point was, whether or not it was that, or even like my neurochem class, and I had this horrible instructor. I mean, people kind of liked her because she was awful. Um, just like kind of brutal in a like drill sergeant sort of way. But I appreciated the camaraderie. It kind of pulled a class of 100 students to kind of come together and like oh my god, like we've got to work really hard. We got to get the grades. But it wasn't fun, and it wasn't. It doesn't have to be fun, but it didn't feel like good learning. It felt like rote memorization in the worst sort of way. It was like the worst parts of undergrad without any of the positive pops of like, oh, I'm having these aha revelations. I'm having really insightful moments where I can like learn and grow. Instead, I was learning how to just memorize, and I don't know. I felt like when it was paramedicine, I was excited to learn a lot of the Latin that goes along with the kind of the medicine, because a lot of it was applied. But when I was in medical school, and I was hearing this, it wasn't a University of Utah thing. It was all medical schools. They're all very conservative, and they're all kind of really, I don't know. That's 20 years ago. Maybe things have changed, but at the time, it was not. In my opinion, it was not going to make for a brilliant set of doctors. Instead, it was going to kind of force you to, force you through your paces. And I could already tell that there were guys in my class and girls in my class who I would never want as my physician, 100%. As I could never want to ever be your patient. And I think all of these emotions combined, and thinking about, then going in and needing to be like a resident where everyone kind of bosses you around and is shitty to you, and then going on like surgical rotations, and, a surgeon's kind of shitty to you. I was like, it just seems like years and years and years of I'm not willing to waste my life that way. I'm only live once. And so, no, I don't want to do that. And then the decision was sort of made for me. It was pretty easy. So I took a year off after the first year of medical school, came out of the closet, did a group where I met my husband. It was kind of like a mini TED Talks group where I'd invite in speakers, and they'd come and they'd speak to us on like specific topics. If they had a Mormon background, that was important, but I didn't want to talk about Mormonism, and I didn't want it to be like a support group. I wanted them to talk about like, endocrinology and homosexuality. I want to talk about, like this and homosexuality. I wanted to like talk very specific, things, poetry and homosexuality, history and homosexuality. Let's bring in the speakers. They would speak to us. And then I invited in a bunch of, Mormon return missionaries. Mostly I wanted to date and fuck them, but invited all these Mormon missionaries, and we would learn together, and, then flirt and be fun, and kind of what everyone else was doing as well. I mean, people had these social organizations, right, where guys and girls would get together and you kind of learn shit, and then afterwards you're drinking drinks and hope to hook up. I didn't have anything like that because I was a gay dude, so I created my own, and voila, it worked. And I met my husband, and we had great sex, and then I had great time learning shit, and it was fantastic. But at that time, that was more exciting to me, and that was more interesting and more impactful in my life than medical school. That time when I was away and putting together those conversations and bringing in those speakers. And so when I went back to medical school after my 1 year leave, after I'd come out, now I was probably like, it was ruined for me. The magic of being like a medical student. And because the students would say shit, and the teachers would sort of reinforce it in ways that like sort of like meant to affect your ego. Like, you're in the top 1% of 1% of 1% of humans who even make it into, medical school. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so important. And yeah, but then, you go back and you're like, wait a second. I mean, you could say that about any number of different things, but also like my ego's not so Like, I'm not so full of myself that's, I don't care. Like, you could say that about a number of different professions, but you have to really like what you do. So glad that you're in the top 1% of the top 1% of the top. Okay, hopefully you're going to be a good doctor too. But as for me, not super interested. And I don't remember what all the events were that led up to this, but at a certain point, I basically told a couple of the teachers I had a little bit of an naughty, had a little affair with the very, very handsome one of my professors. Um, and he was bi, and it's amazing, incredible body, super handsome. And I was trying to figure things out. I wasn't trying to fuck anything up, but like, we hit it off and privately had some, interactions. And he just said, an easy way out would just, not show up to things and stop going, let the school sort of, because you're going to, you still have, the debt. There's just make it kind of easy. And I did. I made it pretty easy for them. They didn't try and keep me around. So when I finally said, I'm actually separating, I stopped showing up, and that it triggered a series of events that for them they were able to kind of help me out with my loans and get those on track, which took forever to pay off. Because even though I had a scholarship, that doesn't mean much when medical school is crazy fucking expensive. It covered like books and like a little bit of my tuition, but not the overwhelming majority of it. Anyway, yeah, the process. I had this very kind professor who was super sexy, and he sort of walked me through the process of extracting myself in a way that was going to be okay, and it was okay. And I went on to start a couple of companies before I did porn, and those companies were pretty great learning experience when the global economic crisis hit. And yeah, there wasn't really a market for some of the things that I was doing with Web 2.0 technology. I started up Wiki Review, which was going to be my subjective response to Wikipedia. Instead of, the objective, I was going to have, this, and it still exists. I mean, I probably will launch it eventually. I kind of built all the IP around it and developed a bunch of software. And then I built sort of a platform for people to debate, and that platform is called Open Floor. And you could kind of have people come in and they could debate different points of view, the pros and the cons. And I realized pretty quickly, I could use this to run a political debate. So I approached the Hillary Clinton campaign, who was running at the time, and I said, hey, you should use this. We can run one of your debates. This was before the YouTube debate. And they said initially, oh, yeah, this is great. We'll do it. And then fast forward like a month later, they're like, we're winning. We're winning, so we don't want to do anything that could mess things up. So they declined, and I did not get to use Open Floor. Instead, I went to Massachusetts and ran a mayoral debate using Open Floor. And the way it worked is people would submit, questions, and the questions that were submitted, people could vote on. The ones that people voted up would rise to the top of the queue, and the ones people voted down would go to the bottom. So the ones that mattered most to most people, those are the questions the moderator would ask. And you could also comment on the questions. Relatively simple concept, but it wasn't being done, hasn't been done since. And the debate was amazing. And then I ran, mayoral debate in Salt Lake City. And the person who was like very ahead in the polls answered questions in ways that were shockingly bad. And the whole thing was live streamed at the time. And the person who was the campaign manager was a friend of mine, and he got really pissed off. And I was like, she answered the questions in ways that were shockingly bad. She was incredibly defensive. She was aggressive towards other people. Anyway, she tanked in the polls after that, and she lost. And she should have. I mean, you go back and you watch. But yeah, my platform allowed people to ask questions, and then the questions matter most to most people went to the top. And she answered the questions, and she got, I felt really good about it. But my friend was really pissed off because he lost his job because he was, a campaign manager. And I was like, well, it's actually democracy. Anyway, so that idea, which was a good idea at the time, it still is a good idea, but that idea wasn't going to put food on the table for me and my husband. And so I went back into the workforce. But while I was back in the workforce, the Prop 8 happened. And I had already proposed to my husband. We were going to move to California, and I was going to, work a couple, job things that were lined up for me. I was going to work in California, going to get married in California. Gay people are allowed to get married in California. And the Mormon church put its engine to work and revoked gay marriage. successfully passed Prop 8, and gay marriage was revoked from LGBT community, or gay people, and I think that sparked something in my brain. I mean, I also was part of the group that went through the records, and I found one of my own siblings had donated, because the Mormon Church asked the Mormons to donate money and resources and time. And I found one of my siblings had donated a ton of money, not a small amount, like a money that could have kept me afloat for a year or two in rent and food and whatever. Donated a ton of money, because she and her husband, um, he was a very successful lawyer for one of the biggest law firms in California, and they had money, and had a bunch of kids, and they could have put that money towards anything, but the Mormon Church asked them to put it towards this. And in that moment, I just thought, this only happens when religion is involved, and you've just taken away a right that existed, which religions should not be doing. Religions should not be getting involved, taking rights away. Um, and the only reason that they dislike us is, again, because of the sex that we're having. And here it is. I've already proposed to my husband. We're going to get married. We wanted to get married in California, but now the right's been taken away. No, could still get married in Massachusetts at that time. So we changed our plans, told family, and my family was still sort of working out. The siblings were still trying to figure out how they felt about this. My dad was pretty insistent that everyone will get over it and everyone will come. And my mom was having a harder time sort of wrapping her head around everyone's various kind of journey. Meanwhile, my husband's family was not going to really be attending at all, other than his brother. And when we were thinking about where we were going to go on our honeymoon, etc., and this is sort of a pivotal part of this story of when we decided to do porn. I decided that I wanted to make sure that I took him to some of my, like, if we're going to get married in Massachusetts, I want to take him to places where I grew up in Virginia and Washington, D.C. area. I mean, as a kid, I would always get on the metro like once a month, and I'd go into the mall, the Smithsonian Mall in Washington, D.C., and I'd go into my favorite science fiction museum, the Museum of Natural History, because Mormonism, that was fact. But the Natural History Museum, that was my favorite fiction. And I, as an adult, of course, thought, this is incredible. That's amazing. That's the way my head worked. But I wanted to take Jay there because the Natural History Museum had been sort of my happy place. And so anyway, we got married in Massachusetts. We invited, my family, and only my siblings, but not their spouses, were going to come. But the sister, who had donated a ton of money to Prop 8, she would only come if she could bring the husband. I was like, fine. It's fine. This is my wedding. I'm not going to, there's nothing that's, if you're going to be there, I want you to be there because it's an important, moment, and it's special to me. You're my family, but you're there to support. And if you're not there to support, don't come. And she showed up, and she showed up with her husband. And I mean, before this, for sure had called her out on, this donation, and she very calmly leveled back. That is what the Mormon Church asked us to do, and I am a faithful Mormon. And so you again, she kind of proves this point that I already had in my mind, that you would not have done these things had it not been for, right? You're acting against my interests had it not been for religion. Anyway, so she comes, and Jay's family, even though his parents, the day he came out, were really lovely, had since gone the other direction, so they weren't going to come. But his brother came. We get married in Massachusetts. Incredible wedding. Just love, like you wouldn't believe, from my family, and it was very small. It was just kind of immediate family, out on a pier, out on a little island called Plum Island, on a boardwalk. It's beautiful. We had a violinist that I hired and came and played. It's lovely. We then got in a car and drove, and hit a couple of the important spots on the East Coast that were part of my childhood. But one of them, of course, was Washington, D.C. Got a little Airbnb or some type of hotel or something. I think it was a hotel, actually, on the Fruit Loop, the DuPont Circle, and went into the Smithsonian. And while we were there, I walked into the room where they had like the blue whale, hanging up on the ceiling, and I went into a bunch of the different rooms, sort of my favorite rooms. And there's this room where they had the pillar that I'd never really paid attention to. And Jay and I looked at this pillar, and it's multi-story pillar, and at the top you see these lines. And so I walk up to it and read the plaque, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is the pillar of all of human history, except we're starting from, the formation of the planet. Um, so you look all the way up there at the top, and you see these teeny tiny little lines, and the line that's the thinnest that you can barely even make out, it's all of recorded human history. And so in that moment, it was just sort of this, it hit me like a wave, and I just said, Jay, none of this matters. Our lives as humans, like we've made, we think that we're so important, but we're not. And we think that the things that we have to do with our lives are so important. We're not. We're these insignificant, tiny little pieces of carbon. And if we can do some good in the world, and if we can have a good, lovely life, that's what we should do. So this is the idea that's kind of sticking with us, realizing that, all of human existence can fit in this teeny tiny little line. So we go back to our hotel. We have great sex that night, and the next day, over breakfast, I have like my third ever drink of alcohol, which was like not the time to do it, but I don't know because I don't think about alcohol. But someone gave me like alcohol and I think I asked for alcohol and orange juice. What a screwdriver is that what it's called? Anyway, and so like alcohol and orange juice, one drink, and I am like, woo! I am very happy. And so I start like, lobbing questions at my husband. I'm like, if you could do anything you wanted, what would you do with your life? If you want to, whatever. And so we're having a great time. He starts to get sauced. And so the two of us are, have a pretty significant buzz. And he's like, comes up with very fun things he would do. And I was like, what would I do? I'd create, porn company. And we just had a great time talking about how we've seen so many people doing the Mormon missionary thing in porn, and it's always so bad. And so we start making fun of all of the porn we've seen that's just bad. And we're like, and the more I started to joke about it, the more I realized, what actually is true? Everyone sort of makes fun of porn. It's always a joke. Why is it always a joke? Why is it that we always like say, oh, it'd be really funny is if you drop the soap and then you bend over. Like, why is gay sex always a joke? Why is porn and the porn plot lines are just bad, but that it's bad because it's porn. Why is that the case? Why don't we actually take this seriously? And then I started kind of playing back for him. I was like, actually sometimes took it really seriously. Back in the day, Colt took it seriously. When I was secretly watching porn before I came out, I saw some early days Falcon stuff that, back before it was terrible. Back then it was great. And it's part of our gay history. You had these people who, joined with, the founder and creator, this San Francisco real estate guy who creates, Falcon 40 some odd years ago. And they brought a lot of their Hollywood skills to bear, and they really took it very seriously, and they made some kind of pretty stuff, still tacky things here and there, still not taking it seriously, but it's certainly not the joke that it is today. And I think then suddenly we started like saying, what if we were to do porn? Let's do porn. What would that even look like? We had no idea. We didn't know anything about it. And, again, global economic crisis had already happened. So I had lost the business that I had created. And we were already thinking like, maybe we don't go to California. We don't know. So then we just looked it up, and pretty quickly we're like, what you're going to do? We're going to go on Craigslist. This is what guys are doing. They're listing on Craigslist. Come in and you can jerk off. And I'll dress them up as a Mormon missionary, and we'll do it right. And no one will even know whether or not these are real Mormons or they're not real Mormons. Get it right. And the thing will be that, these guys will come in and they're secretly sneaking away from their mission companion to jerk off on camera. And you won't know whether or not they're actually, a real Mormon or not, because I'm going to feed them the lines, and it's going to be really delicious. Like they're showing their dick on camera, they're jerking off, and they're going to come, and then they're going to like be a little bit embarrassed. But you get to get this like secret peek into these Mormon missionaries, and it blew up. I mean, like I went onto a torrent site, and I saw that the first 4 Mormon boys videos that we released. So it's a couple months later, right? So our honeymoon, we decided we're going to do it. Then we spent like 4 or 5 months driving around the country on Craigslist, getting stuff. I mean, our first set of lights was like construction lights. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but yeah, I mean, like we got these videos and lit poorly and recorded on insane thing. Anyway, but we got them and we put them on online. We built our site from nothing. And I was very scrappy, applying every bit of technology that I had learned, and kind of Google was teaching me everything that I could. Jay was learning video editing. And when I went on the torrent site and I saw that our first 5 videos had been put into a pack and had been downloaded over 5 million times within the space of like a week of these things going online. Great. So we launched the site with 5 videos, and like the first 4 or 5 were in this pack. So a week later, millions of downloads. Millions of downloads. And I was like, God damn, if each one of those people, instead of stealing it, if they'd just given me $1, I'd have $4 or $5 million right now. Just give me a fucking dollar. Give me 50 cents. Give me something. I put this together. And then I started to process. Okay, there is a market. There are people who are hungry for this. And people started talking about it like, oh, it's Mormon porn. And I was like, it's not Mormon porn. You don't get it. There's no such thing as Mormon porn. What I am doing is I am using Mormonism as a vehicle to tell a story, and you buy it. Great. So I started telling a very particular story, and I started giving people permission to live in a fantasy, because very few people have that. Even the Mormons who had their relationship to Mormonism, they recognize that they're sort of suspending belief in order to kind of live in this particular fantasy. And I thought, okay, actually, Jay, we've got a business model here. But we were living, month to month at that point. And the University of Minnesota approached me because of a relationship I had with a head researcher at the University of Minnesota when I was in medical school. And they said, hey, we were doing this research project at the intersection. We want to we've got a bunch of NIH funding. We want to look at the intersection of technology and gay sex. And we have this idea about like a particular way in which we can approach this. There's this new site that came online. We know Utah's a big place, but maybe, just maybe, you happen to know a guy who's created the site called Mormon Boys. I'm kind of trying to get in touch with him. And I was like, are you shitting me? I was like, this researcher, I know on a first name basis, and I'm talking to him. We had met on a listserv when I was in medical school, and I picked up him and I called him and I said, just so you're aware. Anyway, I ended up in Minnesota filming some content, went to his home. And so he had this, great revelatory moment, where I get to tell him, I'm this person that you're looking for.
Yep.
He's like, oh my God. He's like, do you want to work for me? So we worked it out. A couple months later, I'm at the University of Minnesota working as a project coordinator for big NIH funded grants looking at MSM, men who have sex with men, as the research subject in these kind of technology and sex-based research initiatives, really trying to understand how to affect behavior to stop the spread of HIV. I mean, that was kind of the fundamental idea. But in the meantime, I'm getting great market research around why people buy the porn that they buy, what they're looking at, why they subscribe, what they don't. Anyway, whatever, I get to ask them all kinds of questions. And that strengthens, over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, it's 5 years total, I was at the front lines of asking men why they buy the porn that they buy. Why do they subscribe to the porn? What actually causes them to click and buy versus just watch all of the free stuff? And because I spent 5 years doing my job, but also learning, what's going on in this space, and they wanted me, by the way, not only to come, they also wanted me to work on my site. So they were like, you can absolutely do your job, but you can also do porn. It's a joke. I can't make up time, but I tried as hard as I could. At a certain point, I launched a Magic Mormon underwear line called Mormon Secret. And that blew up because Mitt Romney was running for president, and I made a bunch of money because I sold a shit ton of Magic Mormon underwear that I made in China. But then, I relaunched Mormon Boys, and I applied a lot of the knowledge that I had. And now it's called Masonic Boys. Mormonism is based on Masonry, largely. There's some nuance there. But between that relaunch, and it had been online anyway, I was making, a little bit of money as people were sort of buying these older videos. But between, when I went online and 5 years ago, when I lost everything, I had this really incredible experience growing and learning in the adult space, and then ultimately making a massive mistake. And had all of those things not happened, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so 5 years ago, I did have to start over, and I created Carnal Media, and I relaunched my sites. So I relaunched Mormon Boys as Masonic Boys, and I relaunched.
Why'd you have to start over?
Okay. I'll tell you. But those sites, Family Dick is now a gay cest, and Mormon Boys, the people who took Mormon Boys from me call it Missionary Boys. It's Masonic Boys now. And, I have all of the Carnal Plus brands, from Boy for Sale to Scout Boys to Twink Top and I purchased Guns Blazing, which had 30 sites of these historic, sites in the network. And then I started launching additional networks, and I started looking at the landscape and realizing that I could actually work with performers in a way that other people weren't interested in. But that's today. And I think that anyone who goes into business should expect to have some major setback, and they should learn from it. Mine was painful, very painful. What ultimately happened is this, in short. I launched my company, and I had a medical degree, not a legal degree. That's the short version. The longer version is about 5 or 6 years in. My younger sibling was struggling, and I had helped her move from Massachusetts to New York, to Brooklyn. She was a photographer. She wanted to make it big. She figured she needed to go to New York. She had a life partner who was a gay boy. She was a lesbian. I had never really been super, super close. She was sort of the kid who would like take things off the candy shelf and like stick it in her jacket and like walk out. And like she's 4 years younger than me. And I was always weirded out by some of her behaviors. But like we weren't super close. But then suddenly I came out, and she was married to my last mission companion. And then she came out, and so they divorced. My last mission companion was like a very good friend of mine. So like I was sort of thrown into this weird situation where she's also like, you can't even be friends with him. You can't talk about him. Even saying that you like him is, and I was like, oh. So, but she's gay and I'm gay and we're in a Mormon family. So I figured, try and anyway. So she makes this move to New York and as a photographer, and she was struggling, and I wasn't. I was doing really well with Mormon boys, and like I felt like I could turn. And I had tons of performers who were like, "Hey, can you do the straight version of Mormon boys? Because I'd really like to, be a performer with girls instead of with guys. Like I can do it with guys, but I'm actually straight." And I was like, maybe, but like my principal focus is this thing. But yeah, eventually I plan on launching a site. I'll call it Mormon Girls. Well, and suddenly I had a lesbian who was struggling, and her business had sort of evolved. And suddenly she was in a situation where, and I didn't know just how bad it had gotten, but she really hated the job, and she was, I guess she was like standing up brides. Like she'd take their money, but then wouldn't show up on the wedding day. And I didn't know that. Right? Like that was news to me. I found out later, unfortunately. But she hated it, and I knew she hated it. And I was doing well, so I proposed that I would fund the creation of Mormon Girls, and that they would cast it and shoot it, because I didn't work with female performers. I worked with male performers. And the long story short is that I found out pretty quickly that she was bad in business. They wouldn't show up to work. They'd kind of show up to go to dinner and like play, and I would end up like having to deal with a lot of the fallout. So they'd kind of set things up, and they'd set things up with the agents, but they'd set it up clumsily. So the agents be really pissed off. There's a lot of homophobia also on the straight side. I ended up holding camera a ton to like, shoot the content when they would shoot content. And also like, I was very insistent, like people know about Mormonism, polygamy, and the 2 Mormon missionaries on bicycles. They know nothing else, nothing. And they don't need to know anything else. I don't want Joseph Smith. I don't want Jesus. I want nothing. It is polygamy. That's the straight fantasy. A dude has multiple women. I'm not a straight dude, but I guarantee you, when people think about being a Mormon, they want like a lot of wives. It sounds awesome. And when gay people think about being a Mormon, they're like a 24/7 forced like to be with another young man. Like those are the 2 worlds. Like that's the 2. Like that's all they know. Don't try and educate them about shit. Like that's it. And they knew better. They were these Brooklynites who knew better. And so they had to school me and tell me, no, it's going to be 2 sister missionaries. We're just going to replicate exactly what you did. And I'm like, no, bad idea. No one knows about sister missionaries. No one cares. It's not a thing. It doesn't even sound sexy. It sounds bad. And of course it was bad, and it didn't make any money. And so then, and they're like, how can you even afford to like bring a bunch of women and men? I'm like, you ever seen Big Love? Like, do you have to see, the dude on screen with all of the wives at the same time? No, he goes into a room and he's having a conversation about the other sister wives, but he's having sex with one woman. And then next scene, he walks into another room and it's a different woman. It's the same dude, different women. Shucker, just keep the dude the same, have multiple women, and the fantasy has been created. It's not complicated. We can write things. You can it's not too difficult. Movie magic, we'll make it work. Nope, would not do it. Anyway, a year in, my husband had it. So I had a conversation. It's like, we're going to pull the plug. She's absolutely not. No, please, no. And so I said, okay. And then they did do the polygamy thing, and it kind of worked, but still, I was still having to deal with tons of bullshit. And they were really at that point saying we're struggling. And so they would come to my Mormon Boys shoots as crew, but then they would say shit like, this is really stupid. And so my husband really wanted to get rid of them, but they were family. I made a very bad mistake. I went into business with family, and they were struggling. Two bad mistakes. You don't want to go into business with someone who's struggling, and you certainly don't want to go into business with family. So to fix it, I went around and shopped around, asked my distributor and other people, hey, you guys work with all the straight companies. I don't. I need someone who can come in and take this real big problem off of my hands, please. And got a couple of offers that were bad. And then I got one offer, and they flew us out to wined and dined us. We grew up Muslim and you grew up Mormon. Hey, bro, amigo, we love you. And I don't know, it's a lot of gold chains and expensive cars and expensive meals. And I got a little bit, anyway, they said as effectively, it's a licensing deal. Just sign. We want you to sign all. We don't want to just do one thing. It's a licensing deal. Sign all of your properties into this licensing deal. We'll blow them up. You won't have to worry about them. And if you don't like the licensing deal, you can kill it because, again, it's a licensing deal. Wasn't a licensing. I mean, it is, but it wasn't, in the sense that I signed an 80-page operating agreement that effectively made it so that if I wanted to ever work in the adult industry ever again, they would have to give me permission. And insofar as that operating agreement was in existence, and they had the right to say no, they don't want to terminate. 50-50, they could say no, I don't want to terminate. I didn't know that until I got into business. And a month in, they were homophobic, they were racist, they were horrible. So suddenly I'm like, okay, well, I want out. And it was very mafia-like. You'll never get out with your stuff. You leave, but you leave everything behind. And that was my house was tied up in this. My bank account was tied in this. And videos and images of me having sex online that I never paid myself were also tied in this. And my sister was going back and forth behind the scenes, talking to them, and they were promising her, effectively, kind of a year in, they were saying, if you help us take all of this from Legrand, we'll give you his ownership. They didn't honor that, of course, but she definitely worked with them, and they took everything away from me. She ended up with, still getting tons of money, selling videos and images of me having sex online against my will, making money, profiting off of videos and images of me having sex online against my will. My own sister. So I mean, it was rough, and ultimately, in a classic move, no, they did not give her what she wanted. She wanted then to get my ownership, and instead, what they gave her was some sort of guaranteed income. And they've profited millions of dollars over the last 5 years. They've made, and when you're in that situation, and I see you sighing, and yeah, it was terrible. I mean, I feel like there was a bit of even PTSD that I had to deal with. But I got to tell you this, Jason, and this is really important for everyone to hear. At the end of the day, people have gone through worse than I've gone through, way worse. And you have to be able to learn from really painful things and pick yourself up and move on. Because if you don't, if you live in anger, and if you live in revenge, if you live in those moments that control you, and there were moments when, I almost passed out with rage. But if I had allowed that to be my life, I would not have gone on to create Carnal Media. And I would have not gone on to have someone in an interview like this tell me, well, how the hell is it that you've come to own half of the gay adult biz world? I do have an incredibly successful company right now, and I'm proud of it. And we're growing. And right now, that's not actually the case for a lot of adult companies. We're growing, and we have a great reputation, and we work extremely well with other performers, because I'm also a performer. And so not only am I a CEO and I run the company, but I also understand where other performers are coming from. But none of that would be true if I had just needed revenge. And yes, there are things I could have done differently. Absolutely. And I would absolutely recommend that people do things differently so they don't end up in the situation that I ended up in. And I'm happy to walk people through that so that they can not go through that horrible, experience. But by the time it got to me hiring an attorney, and by the time it got to me saying, oh, I need to actually do something about this situation, right? And there were lots of kind of horrible things that are the stuff that movies and books are made of. Lots of bad things happened. By the time I had an attorney, there was only really one choice, which was I have to give them what they're asking for, which was everything. And I will end up going on food stamps. I will end up losing all of these properties if I want to start over. And then I have to work fast to get back up on my feet and apply everything I've learned to grow a new business. If I had made any other decision, or if I had dwelled, I wouldn't be here. And I think that's the important lesson. Not, I mean, sure, like we can run a campaign and I can get those people to give me back my, or even let me buy back my properties. Fine. And I would love that. But more importantly, the lesson that I want people to take away from my experience, the cautionary tale, I want them to learn that at the end of the day, when you hear people say you do have to pick yourself up, you do have to learn from your mistakes, and you do have to go on, you must. You absolutely must. Because there are bad people, there are shitty experiences. And as long as you can survive, once you've survived, get yourself back up, learn from those mistakes, and and be happy. Be happy that you have a chance to do it again. Because you don't get a second shot at life. You don't get a second shot at happiness. You get now. So crazy, shitty things happen, and then you learn from it, and you make sure that fewer shitty things happen next time. And then try as hard as you can to enjoy the life that you have. Otherwise, it's going to pass you by.
Damn. Wow. I'm speechless because for I would argue the vast majority of people that would have been enough to capsize them permanently. And just your ability to turn that around and be like, hey, you may have taken everything, but you didn't take what's up here. And the thing is, your content is you. Without you, it's not the same. Like you can't replicate it. Like you're Legrand Wolf. Like you can't. They don't own you. They can buy like the sites and this and that, but you know, wow. Um, when did when did that realization happen for you? When you because when you're young, you think you're going to live forever and this and that, but kind of like what you're saying at the very end, where you realize, holy shit, I only have one life. Like there's no reset, there's no do-over. When did that moment happen? Like I got to be deliberate with everything.
My husband was affected pretty dramatically by all of this, as you can imagine. He'd invested all of his money into our initial, company, and now he was with me, and we were losing everything. Um, and and this is my sister who was taking everything, and I was trying to wrap my head around, you know, family and family responsibilities, like trying to, I don't know. There was a lot of things that I was struggling and juggling with, um, and he and I were sort of holding each other at one point, when a lot of this was going on. Because I mean, this sort of went on for months, where we were in limbo, still in the agreement. The agreement couldn't be canceled. They're trying to take everything from us. Um, and he held me, and he just, he said, "Look, we are probably going to lose everything." Uh, I, I I actually was having my 40th birthday right when this was going on. And so there's no celebration. I'd kind of planned this thing. Do you know the Japanese sushi tradition where they put sushi on a naked woman's body and they eat the sushi off of a naked woman's body? So I had this fantasy that when I turned 40, I was going to hire these young men who were going to be this beautiful, like, performers who wanted to kind of be there and get them hard and put, the sushi out, and we'd have kind of fun. And it'd be like a really lovely and sexy mix of, like guys that I think would sort of appreciate this. Is sort of my fantasy of my 40th birthday. Not what happened. What actually happened at my 40th birthday party is that a friend of ours who was living in San Diego said, "Come out to San Diego, come out, hang out at my house. I want you to like forget everything, do the most weird thing ever. Like go to, I'm not really a Disney guy, but he's like, just take your mind off of everything. Go to Disney Land World. Is that the thing? In California, Land, I think it is, right? Land.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we went to California, spent some time in San Diego, And on my 40th birthday, I was, in in Disneyland. I don't mean to like shut out Disneyland. Disney has done some really important things, and we can talk about that a different conversation. But there I was, and I get this phone call, and I'm told they want to take, they're going to take everything. And this, like, I had one of my sisters is sort of acting as mediator. The other sister's on there. And she says it really flatly, like, we're going to take these things. I mean, incredible sociopath, total grifter. But like, I'm grappling with sort of like the grifter nature of her. And I'm sort of living in that, and I'm like horrified, um, and uh, and so I'm like emotional, and I tell Jay, what's happening. He holds me and he says, "Yeah, they're going to take everything. That's what's going to happen, and we're going to accept it. And I will love you, and we're going to live our lives, but we only get one life. And so if you can't move past in this moment, you have to start thinking smart and fast and hard right now. How are we going to move past this? Because it's how, like, now is the moment. Like, right now, there's going to be a lot of pain. I'm not telling you not to feel the feelings you're feeling, but we will have each other, and it will get better eventually. But we have to really be smart, and we have to stick together, and we have to know that we've got to be focused more on the future right now than we are in this moment on the pain. Because if we don't, then the future won't be as great. And we have a great future ahead of us. And cry, and you kind of think through this moment, because pain is real. I mean, everyone who experiences pain in any form, and kind of, the pain was there. And, he wasn't asking me to, like, deny myself expressing that pain. Oof, pain. But in that moment, the truth of what he was saying was just so powerful. I just thought, yeah, we only live once. And then we kind of developed a mantra of, it only gets better from here, right? We started saying, even like, the best is yet to come. And at a certain point, we started making that our reality. The best was yet to come. Absolutely. And how could it not be? Under those circumstances, the best would be yet to come. And so everything was sort of building one block on another. And I actually kind of shocked myself. I mean, it was like a year into our new venture. In September of 2018, the agreement to get out of that relationship, give them everything. So my bank account's gone, everything's gone. In 6 months' time, we had launched the new company and launched new sites, and we were doing better than we ever had as Mormon Boys and Family Deck. 6 months. My revenues were higher than they had been. And there were a lot of things that I'd sort of toyed with. And then, frankly, that partnership and that relationship with my sister really held me back, because I was constantly trying to, like, feed this beast and, like, take care of them and take care of theirs. But the moment I was actually freed of them and sort of their bullshit and their, problems, I was just allowed to kind of operate. And granted, I could have done this much more effectively if I still had my properties, right? But, I made that mistake about 3 years earlier. 3 years earlier, I'd made the mistake of bringing, someone who's not good at business and not doing due diligence and, on that person, and doing business with family. That mistake was already made. So now, freed of that burden, I was able to apply what I wanted to and kind of build, something from the ground up. And, I was able to negotiate a purchase of Guns Blazing, this historic network that had Falcon and had it birthed and was home to so many really important sites. From Jason Sparks Live, which had found all of these performers over the years, some of the top performers. It had in it, historic brands, Raging Stallion and Falcon and Bennett. Anyway, whatever, like tons of different, lots of different types of sites. At one point, I think Guns Blazing had like 80 sites, but lots of straight and trans and whatever. Not when I purchased it. It had already been purchased by AABN, and then it had been stripped of Falcon, which then went to AABN and was going to be managed by another group at that point. It had been stripped of a couple of sites and then sold back to the employees. The employees had bought it, were running it for about 2-3 years before they decided they wanted to sell it And because I had a really strong relationship with them, they approached me. I didn't have any money. So I cut a deal with them and I purchased it for a portion of the profits going forward. And that was critical. But I was also negotiating against big money, people in the industry that were offering them cash. And ultimately, it was my relationship with them that persuaded them to sell it to me over someone else. Had I not had that relationship, had I not had that reputation, I would not have gotten guns blazing. And that fast forwarded things pretty quickly. I then had my payment processing. I had about a 20-year history of a biller with an outstanding record that suddenly I acquired. I also was able to acquire in that transaction relationships with all kinds of different groups that I'd been talking to, but now actually I had like existing business and I was able to build on that business. They weren't doing well. They were really, really struggling. But today, Jason Sparks, you talk to him, he's doing many, many, many multiples of revenue of what he was doing 5 years ago when I met him. I was able to apply a lot of my skills, a lot of my knowledge, and he's very happy. He's very happy to be in our network, very happy, and we grew him. Other people who were in the network, frankly, didn't want to hear what I had to say. It was fine, and we found a new home for them and went elsewhere. But again, that acquisition really helped me grow. So within 6 months, I was able to launch my sites on an existing sort of like framework. And I was able to build that framework so that I could turn around and honor the deal that I had made, the owners of Guns Blazing. It was going to be a matter of 2 years before it was 100% mine. My ownership didn't vest for 2 years. So I had kind of obligations to them, but I was able to launch my sites, and they performed exceptionally well. And then I was able to iterate pretty quickly, because I no longer had these people telling me, what to do or what I couldn't do. I mean, I've been the CEO and owner of my own company, and I couldn't do things. And suddenly now I was able to do things. And when it was magical. And my husband, was right there with me, and all of the employees that had sort of been, seized by this other, they all quit over there and came over. Even some of the employees of the straight company, they so hated it over there, but then they saw that, what we were doing. And so they quit their jobs over there. Even like friends of, the owner of that company, like would quit and come over. And I was like, you might be a spy. I don't know about this. And they're like, no, like, definitely not. And I was like, okay, well, anyway, it's just wild. And so all these people, started coming over and asking, how can I help? I want to get involved. I want, what you're doing is amazing. And within like 3 years, the pandemic hit. And I had always had the philosophy of having lots and lots of content in the bag. And, lots of people had hated this. They're like, it's such a waste. But I would work really hard to have like at least a year, if not 2 years of content in the bag. And I was at 2 years in 2020. And guess what that did for me? That meant that content that I had filmed not only got me through the pandemic, which was critical because I have a medical condition that makes it so that getting COVID would have been lethal. But anyway, so I was able to sail through and grow. And I grew, comparing my revenues, because I knew that the revenues of my company were probably going up. So if they, had gone from X to 2X or X to 3X, I kind of knew what they were. For reasons that I can go into here in a second, I actually found out exactly what they were making, but what my former company was making. But I knew that based on those projections, I was doing 10X. And that was all the proof that I really needed that I was in sort of it was a new game for me. And since then, I've tweaked things, and now we have a lot of really sophisticated people on our team who have been great. Our company's 40 people, strong. I pay American salaries to my staff, and then they're hiring Filipinos and talking shit about them, calling them flips, which was part of the racism that I just could not handle when I was there. And they want to run a lean ship. Who doesn't? That's good business. Run a lean operation. But it felt, weird how they just, instead of making, the best product and doing the best business, it was bilking things at every corner. And I was just kind of very happy that we were able to do what we did and grow to where we are without having to resort to what I felt like were cheap ways of doing business. And at the end of the day, here's the other thing that's true. 5 years in, although all of that's true and it's all horrible, I actually no longer, and this is going to sound wild, I don't believe in forgiveness. That is not true. And that's not what I'm about to say. But I don't have animosity towards the owner of that company. And here's why. Although what I feel like it did is like not something I would ever do or condone, we are playing a game of Monopoly. And I'm sure you remember as kids, when we played Monopoly, there was always that asshole who was willing to literally obliterate everyone the moment they got Park Place or the moment they got Boardwalk. And you're just like, oh my God, why are you trying to you're like destroying everyone? Like, and total domination, and that's sort of, in his world, this is all a game. And it is. I mean, capitalism, unfortunately, it sucks, but it is kind of a game. And if you play that game ruthlessly, there are ways to do it that feel horrible for those people that are playing and their livelihood is at stake, or videos and images of them having sex that they don't want you to sell online are being sold. Well, turns out legally he's just fine. And so I don't have animosity towards him. I don't. I actually think he plays the game in a way that we all should be paying attention to. And you can learn something from him. Don't replicate, harming people, but think about why it is that certain things are successful, wherever it comes from, and then use that knowledge to do good in your business, because actually, as you know more about business, you can actually be more effective overall. I don't think you have to sit there and dwell on, whether or not you agree or disagree with someone's business practices per se. If they're doing something that's illegal, well, there are laws, and the laws and regulations take care of, or should take care of, regulating people and keeping people in check legally. But if they're within the law, if you want to deal with it, go pass other laws. If if you don't like what people are doing, or go, work on regulatory, changes, but don't sit there and demonize someone. That's a waste of your time. Learn from people and be smart. And so I could probably, I know this is going to be shocking. Again, don't believe in forgiveness, but I absolutely think that I could sit down and have a business conversation with this guy now. And that's saying something. I think I've come a really long ways. And I could even say there are things about his business that are not shitty, that I quite respect. And he's got a kid now. He got married. He's got a kid. He's got other things that he thinks about in life. At the end of the day, kind of like what I was telling you at the beginning of this, we're probably more similar. As horrible as I would have, like if I had ever heard myself say those words 5 years ago, I would probably want to take I'm like, absolutely not. Punch that person who's talking to you. That is not true. I don't feel that way. But at this point, it's true. We're probably all very, very similar. And the things that make us the same are way more significant than things that make us different. And so you really do, I hope, want to get to a place where even if something bad has happened to you, don't spend time, dwelling in that. Think about, is there ways in which you can approach people with a degree of empathy, with a degree of thoughtfulness, and say, hey, yeah, shit, that was horrible. But at the end of the day, even if you did that horrible thing, we're still probably more alike than different.
That's true. So when it comes to that gentleman and your sister, and the thing is, the reason I'm asking this is because I feel like people could apply it to relationships, to really anything. Is I always tell people when, an ex cheats on them or they have a bad experience in business or whatever, I'm like, it was meant to be a lesson, not a life sentence. So my question is, how did you not let that rage and that betrayal, and because that can consume you and just destroy the rest of your life?
I don't really believe in things having meant to be some way. Everything's random chance. But insofar as, and I don't mean no disrespect, but I perceive things in just a purely scientific way, and that works for me, and it works for the believer, because at the end of the day, if everything is just random chance and bad things happen to good people, right? You still have to make the decision. Are you going to allow random chance to consume you? Are you going to allow the things that have to, are you going to try and make the best of whatever happens in life, and
Yeah.
ultimately learn the skills necessary to try and keep at bay bad things, and not get caught up in bad things. So that's the person who doesn't is not a believer. For the believer, the part for me that has always been a little bit tricky is, uh, why do bad things happen to good people? If there is a supreme being, I don't want to believe that you are okay, this supreme being, with me being
Mhm.
harmed, and that was really upsetting. But in the sense that it's all stochastic chance, I, it's less of an emotional response when bad things happen. I don't think, oh yeah, someone could have prevented this. I just think, well, it's part of just the way things are. But insofar as a believer thinks one step further and says, yes, they could have prevented, they didn't. And that's supposed to be a trial of my faith or a trial of, who I am. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, allow it to be that. Allow it to just be a trial and move on. Learn from it. Do not live in it. Don't dwell it. So if you actually believe this supreme being has allowed this to happen, then draw from it strength. Don't draw from it, this idea that you need to dwell on it and seek out revenge. And that's not going to lead to anything other than more horror. Try as hard as you can to lean into your belief at that point, which is that these things, that happen are meant to make you a better person. Now, unfortunately, what happens when you get to religion, a lot of times people say, oh, this happened to me for a reason. Now, what this person, what Supreme Being is telling me is that I am supposed to now exact revenge. I am supposed to do this horrible thing to other people. And they do. And then you know that this is true. And this is unfortunately part of the challenge that we deal with right now with some of the more extreme members of
Yeah.
religions that are not quite as neutered as other religions. Um, in the West, we've neutered Christianity pretty healthily. So Christianity is not really a particularly violent religion anymore. That violence has existed. It's part of the heritage of Christianity. But as of today, it's less violent. Other religions don't necessarily have that strong, influence, historical influence
Yeah.
that's neutered it and prevented it from being very violent. Today remain quite violent, and that's a problem. But whether or not you are a non-believer or a believer in something, um, I think the outcome could be the same, which is that you say, I'm not going to dwell. I'm not going to allow that to rule my life, because my life is a gift. My life is this thing that I have, and I want it to be wonderful. And in order to do that, I have to learn from the bad things and move on.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, obviously, building your company back to what it is now and blowing, what you used to do out of the water. What what separates you from everyone else? What do you think? I mean, like up here, all the stuff you have up there, that's how does that translate? Like, let's say someone's watching this interview and they've never watched any of your work. What do you think sets it apart?
I think, um, I think what absolutely is most important is that we celebrate fantasy. Porn is the place for a doctor to have a sexual interaction with a patient, not real life.
Yeah.
Porn is a place for a young man to fuck his coach. Young guy who's got 9 inches of, dick swinging between his legs, and you got a coach who's kind of a big mask bottom who absolutely loves to get fucked, and he wants some smooth twink to kind of like mount him and fuck his brains out and come in him. Great. That sounds like a great bit for fantasy. Do we really want to have, doctors fucking patients, or, encouraging coaches to have their, players come and fuck them? Probably not in real life. That's not right. Fantasy exists and can be celebrated so that people have an outlet to sort of explore ideas. That's why I really believe that, you know, books are such an awesome thing. They allow you to express all kinds of ideas. It's why movies and freedom of speech are so important. They allow you to express ideas. And sexual ideas repressed are a real problem. You want to have those ideas be expressed. You want people to feel liberated in expressing those ideas. What's happened is a weird sort of thing, especially in the gay community. We've been told for so long that we're no better than, I don't know, rapists or people who, fuck animals. Um, we've been told these things for so long that we're incredibly sensitive. We're super nervous that, oh my God, what if someone thinks that I am, this thing? No, no, no. I just want a white picket fence and a little dog and my husband. I'm going to live my, little life. And you're like, okay, but at the end of the day, and so I've had a lot of people, starting with Mormon boys, so the early version of Masonic boys. I have these kind of very handsome older men who are hung, walking these young men through their paces, kind of initiating these young, innocent men as sort of the fantasy, uh, inducting them into the world of gay sex. And these young men, suddenly their eyes are open, like, oh my God, this is amazing. I love this. And you have these experienced older men sort of saying, yes, let me walk you through this. And people are like, oh, that's disgusting. Why are you trying to, showcase these really handsome Sean Cody-esque 25-year-olds with these disgusting old trolls? Well, that is what was being said to me by gay men. And I'm like, really? So at what point does someone magically cross over that boundary from like being, I don't know, a gay man who's just having sex to a gay man who's an old troll, to a gay man who's lecherous, to a gay man who, like, what? Really? That's what you, like, I don't get it. Also, I think it's hot. So at the end of the day, it's a fantasy. It's just a fantasy. I think it's a hot fantasy. And if you don't like it, don't watch it. Why, how have you even seen these things? Why are you watching these? Stop it. Stop watching it. Stop commenting on it. But yeah, I mean, it was really, I was not popular because I wasn't doing the thing that everyone else was doing. I was, telling this story of, older men or like 45, 55, 65, really handsome and rugged, having sex with these like, 18, 19, 20 to 25 to 30-year-old young men. And that dynamic, which I just thought was beautiful, telling a particular, a fantasy story, a fantasy narrative that actually weirdly had been part of my, my own personal sexual journey. Because frankly, when I was coming out, the guys that knew how to have sex, they were older than me by a lot. And then, man, were they good. And man, did they know how to have good sex. And I learned a lot from them. And oh, they turned me on. And especially if they were like hung older men, I could not get enough. But I was being told it was disgusting. I just said, actually, it's a fantasy. And you know, where you should have older religious leaders having sex with the 19 and 20 and 21-year-old men. That should exist in porn, not in real life.
Yeah.
That's the outlet for it. So it's not disgusting. It's actually a great fantasy. It's fantasy material. And if you don't get that, then do you not equally have a problem with like Texas Chainsaw Massacre? They're still actors, but they're they're disemboweling someone. They're ripping off limbs. Like, are you really telling me that that's okay? But people exercising the right to experience a fantasy over here, where the fantasy is sort of a handsome older man with a handsome younger man, that particular fantasy, not okay. Ripping people to pieces, killing them, totally okay. But over here, older, younger, interaction of people who are of legal age, not okay. I disagree. Okay, next fantasy comes along. I'm like, I think is really hot. This magazine that I found in San Francisco at Rock Hard on the Castro called Hand Jobs Magazine. And oh my God, I was so into it. His dad's on incest stories, and it was like wild. And I couldn't believe that I was finding this thing, and it matched up with Nifty Erotic Stories, which then I became obsessed with. And like they have all these different kind of like, things you can pick. And one of them is sort of like the dad son incest one. And I was like, yeah, this is like, it's super hot fantasy. I have a great relationship with my dad, but I am not attracted to him. Absolutely never have wanted to have sex with him in real life. But in a fantasy world, yes, in a fantasy world, I can imagine there being this hot interaction. And when I read it, or when I see, in Handjobs, it's the illustrations from Jossman and Julius and other great illustrators. I was like, yeah, totally hot, super into it. And so I release Gay Cest version 1.0, and people ate it up. I mean, man, it blew up. And people also said, oh, it's disgusting. And I was not popular. doubly not popular now in the gay adult industry. And over and over again, what I found is that the adult industry was mirroring the mainstream media, which when I was in college had gone the route of reality television. Reality television exploded when I was like 19, 20. And suddenly what all porn wanted to be was sort of that same thing, like show two dudes fucking on a couch, casting couch, two dudes fucking in pretty light. I mean, Cocky Boys was nothing if not just like suck and fuck, but with good lighting. And I was just like, okay, well, what actually turns me on when it's reality is things like early days Men at Play. I mean, not anymore because it got sold, but early days was like these guys, beautiful men who are hung like fucking horses, and they were uncut, and they just like plowing each other's brain. Like that was hot. The fantasy was everyone's got a 10-inch dick. It's the Tom of Finland fantasy. Everyone's got like a 12-inch cock. So if you're going to do reality porn, do reality porn that way. But then Men at Play also would put all this fantasy, the boss fucking, his intern. I'm like, we should not do that in real life. Totally okay in porn. Right. And I recognized that, there was stuff that was reality and a couple of people, really leaned into it. And then there was stuff that was fantasy. Even the stuff that was shot like reality, Sean Cody, the fantasy was straight dudes can be turned to have gay sex. That was the fantasy. And yeah, I mean, a lot of straight dudes back then were gay for pay. But more than 50% of his guys definitely liked the gay sex that they were having. But you didn't know because he really cut off, any access from the outside world. So like even the producers weren't allowed to have social media, but the guys weren't allowed to have social media. He regulated the fuck out of that. Former Mormon, by the way. And so even something that was shot in reality porn style was a fantasy, which is actually kind of what like Real Housewives of whatever. It's scripted. And it's a fantasy, but it's made to look like reality television. So all of the porn world was doing reality porn. I wasn't. And now, if you look at mainstream television programming, how much money is being spent on reality television, reality programming? Very little in comparison to like the $1 billion budget for things like Lord of the Rings, whatever. There's just shit tons of money now is going into fantasy. The needle's moved back the other direction, but the porn companies haven't. I do fantasy. And I celebrate that fantasy. And insofar as I celebrate that fantasy, I am really able to let people enjoy and explore something that is a fantasy. And by giving people permission to explore their fantasies, I think I'm creating a really healthy environment for people to say, I'm okay. My fantasies are okay. There are people like me, which is the opposite of telling people that, oh, if you have those disgusting, weird thoughts, yeah, I was okay with you being gay, but you having weird thoughts, I'm not okay with that. Keep those to yourself, you disgusting pervert. Like we can't do that. We have to be able to say like, hey, you know what? I'm really into like this, amazing book about vampires. And I watch a television show where the vampires like, yeah, they suck people's blood and whatever. I also am really into, this, dad son incest, fantasy. I jerk off to that. Like these things have to become normalized in a way where people stop having the baggage around it so that we can actually say, yeah, I understand the difference between like people being ripped to pieces on the screen or people fucking each other on the screen in, scenarios that shouldn't happen in real life and real life. None of those actors were actually harmed. And just because someone pulls out a dick on camera doesn't make that real. It's still a fantasy and it's still scripted. And we will get there, but gay people are unfortunately dealing with a lot of societal baggage. And it's going to be a minute before we really get past this. Like, yeah, I've been told though that I'm a particular thing. So I have to really keep everything at arm's length.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love your outlook when it comes to that. I think that's really healthy. Let me get to a couple of fan submitted questions. So a few people wanted to know, have you ever bottomed and or would you bottom on camera?
I have definitely done things that I don't do on camera because Legrand Wolf is a fantastic fictional character. So Legrand Wolf and who Legrand Wolf is as a fictional character is one thing. I am not opposed to saying, that Legrand Wolf is not all of me.
Mm-hmm. All right. Good answer. That was a damn good answer. Probably the most impressive answer I've heard. All right. And you talked about it briefly a second ago. What are your thoughts on straight men and gay porn?
It's great. I don't know. Sex is a special handshake, and I don't think that you're like if you can get an erection and you can orgasm and you're a straight dude, having gay sex, why not? Again, what better way to normalize things than having straight people go to town in gay land? That's great. Let them experience it. Let them have fun. Don't shame them. Don't get them out. What? Like it's a big fun playground. Let people try a little bit of everything. Like
Okay.
that seems super weird to me. People are like, oh, you can't have if someone's not gay, then they can't play a gay character in Hollywood. I'm like, what? That's the point of acting. Like, so you can be something that you're not, or so that you can try. I mean, like, why would someone then win an Oscar? Like, if you want someone in acting to try and like be a particular character, but if they already are that character, did they have to act? I mean, like, there's other, I guess, elements of acting, of course, but like anyone in acting, you want to be able to let people try on and carry the weight of a particular character. And that takes talent and work. And I certainly would not be okay with this idea. And I really find it strange that we're fixated on telling people they can't play a particular role. That's the whole point of acting. Acting is to allow people to play a particular role. When you rob us of that, so am I not allowed to play a straight character in Hollywood? That really limits the number of roles that I'm allowed to do. And like, I don't have to, no one has to know my genitalia for me to play or not play a particular character. I am like, that's it. Now, on the other hand, if I'm a performer in porn, my genitalia does matter.
Yeah.
But that's like saying I have to, be a person that, you and I are different. You shaved your head probably before this interview. I have hair. So if someone were to cast you in a part where you need to have hair, then you got to put some hair on. Whereas if someone asked me to play a part where I needed to be bald, I'm going to shave my hair off. Like, you have to look the particular part, right? But like, it's acting. So let people do whatever they want. And like, also when it comes to sex, if they want to play around with it, in my mind, great. I'm probably not going to do things that I'm uncomfortable with, but that doesn't mean that I want to stop other people from doing something that they're comfortable with. Why?
Yeah. Um, okay. So a bunch of people, I'll just ask it all as one question because it's probably like 30 questions. But people are basically asking, do you only film with fun sized boys? Austin Young, would you ever shoot with like a muscle bear daddy, all that?
I'm not going to pull up my OnlyFans right now or the pictures that are on my Twitter, but I think as you'd see, Cole Blue is neither fun sized boy nor a twink, and I have more content with Cole Blue than I have with probably just about any other performer. I also, if you look, we just signed another exclusive. Anyway, to just sort of illustrate my point, just within the last 2 weeks, one of our performers, Reese Scott, is incredibly handsome, huge dick, beautiful older top, amazing body. We just fucked. We had a great collab that we just did in Dallas. I happened to be there running Carnal All Stars shoot space, where we kind of rent a house and we allow all of our exclusives to come and create content. I yeah, I am very picky. I think, like we all are, in terms of our sexual interests, but uh, I'm also a sexual omnivore in the sense that within the spectrum of what I like, within the spectrum of what is legal, I absolutely find men attractive. So there are reasons why an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old guy is going to be attractive. There are reasons why someone in their 20s or 30s will be attractive to me. I find guys that are in their, 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. There are certain guys that I absolutely have been attracted to and had sexual relationships with that are fantastic, and I'd do it again. Um, yeah, I don't. I think that what it says about people who are asking those questions is that they have gravitated towards specific content with me to
Yep.
the exclusion of other content that features me. Um, and that says something about what they're kind of interested in seeing, and that's fine. I support, people seeing content that features someone who's maybe slightly, older. I'm 45, with someone who's younger. Someone who's, Austin Young is 25, 20, 26 right now. When we first started shooting, he was 19. Yeah, that's great. I like size difference. I think that, lots of different contrasts are really interesting. So I would say go look at more of my content. I absolutely will shoot with lots of different guys. One of my favorite fun size guys, he was at the time 46, 5'2", but with like a 10-inch dick. That was proportionally amazing. Um, but yeah, I mean, incredibly hot guy. And I've shot with guys who are older and much bigger than me. And actually, the exclusive that we just signed this week, Jay Stryker, he's 6'8", and we just had sex yesterday. Um, I It's an unusual thing for me to have a sex partner who is looking down at me when we kiss, and who is so muscular and so big, he can just kind of pick me up. And I fucked his brains out, and it was fantastic.
Okay, I was actually about to say, with all due respect, there's a size difference with 99% of the population.
I mean, that's also
People,
part of the problem, is that I am 6'6", so most people are shorter than me, with the exception of Jay Stryker. But yeah, most people are smaller than me.
okay. And then what are your thoughts? I'm actually curious about this too, because you've probably done more market research on gay porn than anyone else alive. What are your thoughts, like, or does it factor into your thought process the number of female fans you have?
Um, I actually have I have data on this. So do you want to know the percent of female fans that we have?
I'm actually okay. I'm curious.
Yeah, it's around 40%. It's under 40%, but it's close. It's pretty close. Right now, we're sitting at about 46, but it has varied. Only very very recently, it went down. When we first started, it was closer to like the kind of 34, 32, but it's gone up. Now it's come down, but yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Wow.
We also have a very big customer base, so we reach a lot of people all over the world. But yeah, it's a
Does
lot of
that
work.
factor into the way you shoot the content?
No, not at all. No, we shoot content that I think makes sense from a fantasy standpoint, but I don't shoot content to a particular gender. I mean, granted, our write-ups are the most intense in the industry. We have sometimes 2, 3, 4 pages of single-spaced text erotica that accompanies each update, and we know that people are reading our content. A lot of people are reading the erotica, so they don't even have to join to look at some images and read the erotica. And erotica generally has a higher female audience than a male audience, but I read a ton of erotica. I think it's super hot.
Okay. Two last questions, because if I asked you everything I wanted to, we'd be here for 5 hours, and I want to be respectful of your time. If you could have sex in only two positions for the rest of your life, what would they be and why?
2 positions.
Only two.
One would definitely need to be missionary, because I like to feel the guy's hardness against me as I'm fucking him, and I like to tuck him underneath me so I can kind of be face to face and kind of cradle him as I fuck him. It's a very tender position, and I just find it very special to be able to kind of feel someone's hardness against you while you're fucking, because you get a sense of how aroused they are. And then I can also, the way my dick is shaped, I can feel with my dick, I can feel the person's prostate. I can nudge that, and then I can go past it and deep, and can go into their, second, past their sigmoid colon, which people call the second sphincter. Exactly, I could, whatever. Point is, there's a lot that you can do when you're facing someone that I think is really hot. And yeah, it's boring, and it's not necessarily great sex for camera because you're covering everything. But that's why it's so special for sex, is because there's so much that you can do when you're kind of face to face. I think the other position that, if I had to pick one other position, is the position that for me, when I was, um, a kid and I was imagining like what sex would be like, because I weirdly was like told that kissing with guys is not okay, but then began to really get excited about like anything where I'm fucking the guy from behind, but I can kind of grab his dick. So if I can hold his dick, fuck him like any variation of doggy, um, for me is, it's really hot. But I, once again, from a camera standpoint, there's sex that you have for camera, and there's sex that you have
Yeah.
for your personal relationship. So being able to have a guy in sort of like laying flat on the bed, being able to kind of play with him and rim him and hear him moan, and then have him underneath me as I kind of grab his waist and pull him towards me and I fuck him. Um, he can kind of turn back and we can kiss, and I can kind of reach underneath him and hold his dick while I'm fucking him. It's, yeah, I don't know. It's really great.
Okay. And what are your plans for the future? Where would you like to be in 10 years?
Good question. I would like each of the Carnal all-star performers to have become independently wealthy. So my plans are to see my Carnal all-star exclusives become wildly successful in business. But also my goal is that. I also am and now an investor in AI technology, AI in porn. And I very much would like to see us generating incredible AI porn, um, which I think can complement what we do as performers. I'm not at all afraid of it, just like I wasn't afraid of performers coming in. And everyone was super worried when OnlyFans came online, and they're like, "Oh my god, now the performers." I mean, I never said this, but other people in the industry would say like, it's the scourge of our industry, and now people are going to make enough money they're not going to want to work with us. And I'm like, oh, if your offering was you were hoping that people were so desperate they'd come and work for you, that's maybe not such a great place to be in. Net performers absolutely love working with Carnal, and we absolutely pay them well, but we also are a giant billboard for them. And so it's a really great mutually beneficial relationship. Um, and now you hear people talking about, oh my God, AI is going to take my job. And I'm like, yeah, AI will definitely be able to generate both images and video well. But if you think about ChatGPT and how that has worked out in the last year, that hasn't taken everyone's job. It augments things, and it has a place, and it can actually do some really cool things if you let it. I actually think it's going to do some really awesome things for performers and for the industry as a whole. And so I see myself being very heavily invested in AI as it relates to porn, because I think AI is going to do great things in general. It's a very disruptive technology. It absolutely needs to be something we think about, but it's going to do great things in porn, and I'm going to be there with it.
Wow. Okay. Um, Last but not least, anything and everything you want to plug. Where can people find you on Instagram, your Twitter, your social media, your sites, all that good stuff?
I would say go to Carnal Plus, carnalplus.com. It is the largest. I mean, we put everything in a single platform, and it is now the largest gay-owned and gay-run gay porn network. And it's a single subscription service or a streaming service. There's also on demand there, so you can buy the individual videos. On track to be the largest gay porn uh, streaming service on the planet. And will absolutely become that. Go to Carnal Plus. We will this year be folding F to M Plus, which is our F to M. So F to M are trans men. They're men with pussy. And we have, F to M Plus is going to come into Carnal Plus. That's one of my 3 networks. Bareback Plus is going to come into Carnal Plus. It's also one of the networks. We also will have all of our performers launching an AI companion, an AI version of themselves inside Carnal Plus. So you'll be able to interact indefinitely with the performer of your choice. So even if they're not online, if they're not around, their AI companion will be, and will be able to talk to you in their voice with their text. Also generate images on the fly. You'll be able to upload images of yourself and then have your favorite performer fuck you. in those images. True story. So come to Carnal Plus, check it out. You can also go to at Wolf Legrand on my Twitter. But I would hope that you'd go to at Wolf Legrand, or you'd go to at Carnal Plus, or at the real Carnal Plus, which is on Twitter. Go there to find our exclusives, our Carnal Plus exclusives. Go there to find our performers. Go to Carnal Plus and find our performers. Find their OnlyFans and support them. Buy a subscription to Carnal Plus. That supports them. It supports us, and we pay them to come and work for us. But also go and check out the OnlyFans of our performers and subscribe to them. Buy your porn. Buy your porn in the same way that you buy your groceries. You wouldn't think to go into your local neighborhood pub and, walk over to the, grab a glass off the wall and go and pour yourself some beer and drink it and walk out. You wouldn't think to do that. You wouldn't think to go and take things, out of a freezer at Whole Foods or whatever your local grocery store is. We're just guys, and we have a store, and it's a little bit disheartening just how many people know Dr. Wolf. They know Legrand Wolf. They know Fun Size Boys. Now they're going to know Carnal Plus, and they should. And we're going to do well, but we would do so much better, and we could support making the porn that we make if people actually bought it. Be part of the group of people that's this next wave of human beings that no longer see that it's okay to just take the porn that you're consuming. It is a product, and we work hard, and I spend a lot of money and a lot of time making it. And if you're watching it and you haven't paid for it, consider paying for it, please. In the same way that in the 80s people were littering and it just didn't think twice about throwing, garbage out the side of their window from their Volkswagen Vanagon when they're driving down the freeway. Now it's not only not cool, it's illegal. Eventually it's going to be not cool, and it's going to be illegal to steal the hard work that Carnal Plus and all of our performers, do to create content that helps you have an orgasm. That is our product. That's what we want. We want you to have orgasms, tons and tons of orgasms. And what a great product we're offering. It allows you to have STD-free orgasms in the privacy of your home. But you shouldn't consider that product as something you just get for free. Yes, we're helping you have that orgasm. And that is a product, and we make that product, and we make it with care. Pay for it. Pay for it because it should be part of your life, and we can continue to make great product if you pay for it.
And if someone's not familiar, how much is a subscription to Carnal Plus?
It works out to be about $1 a day. Actually, if you get one of our kind of normal subscriptions, it's actually less than that. It could be like 50 cents a day. If you're paying one of our subscription rates, like for the whole package, everything that we have, it might be $2 a day. I would argue if you're having an orgasm a day, it's worth $2.
Very true. Very true. Wow. I am just absolutely blown away by you. I mean, honestly, I could go on for the next 3 hours, but I want to be respectful of your time and your family, and I know how busy you are. Is there anything at all we didn't cover that you wanted to mention?
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to porn performers. It is so important that we talk to the performers of the adult industry, to demystify, to humanize, to let everyone realize that we're all the same. Yes, there are going to be those people who are full of themselves, just like there are people on Wall Street and people in any profession are full of themselves. Yes, there are going to be people with problems. They're also really great people, super smart people, super interesting people, fun people, kind people. They're people. They're just people. And we're all the same. Porn performers might be a little more well endowed, maybe, than others, but neat. Some people are taller, some people are shorter, some people, whatever, but we're all people. And I think if you approach it that way, then there's sort of a lovely thing that happens that makes us sort of feel like, oh, we're actually all interested in taking care of each other. So I love what you're doing. I love that you're talking to porn performers. I like the title, the Porn Star Confessions. I think, the real confession is that we're all just like you. We're businessmen and women. We're people who have families, have ambitions. Most of us are just, kind people who are trying to do something that we love and run a business.
Wow.
And ultimately, we're going to change the world because we're going to make sure that when people think about gay porn versus straight porn, it's about as interesting as, do you like red wine? Do you like white wine? Not, not a big deal. Pick one.
Yeah. Wow.
Hey guys, just wanted to say thank you for watching this video, and if you did really enjoy it, I just wanted to mention there are two ways that you can help to support this channel. On the right side, there are three little dots. If you click those, there is a super thanks button, and on the left-hand side, there is a join button where you can join this channel. There are three different tiers of memberships. The top tier does actually allow one-on-one messaging with me via Discord, and I personally answer that. It is not a service. That's just, both of those are ways that you can help support me as a content creator in this channel. I mention this because YouTube is by far the thing that I enjoy doing the most. It's the thing I'm most passionate about. And unfortunately, a lot of the sexual videos, the porn star confessions, the Dom sub, all that stuff, it is not monetized due to the nature of the videos. But either way, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I hope you guys all have an absolutely amazing week. I love you all.